as always, these things are scarcely planned, scarcely structured. We have a topic, and that's about it. Larry kind of said, well, how about brakes through the ages or something along those lines. So I'm certainly prepared to go down that road. As always, I invite you at any point to chip in. There's more than a few of you here that I sometimes feel like a fraud standing up here and doing this because I've been with Saab for 30-something years now, and I can say I've worked on everything they've ever sold, including the 92. But there's some folks in the room that have got certainly more experience in certain areas than I do. So chip in if I tell a whopper, or if you got a better way of doing something. Don't be at all bashful about hollering. Because that's one good thing about getting old is you get over the loss of the hair, and then you get over the loss of the memory, and then you lose your pride about thinking you know everything. It gets easier than that. At 25 you know it all, and at 50 plus you're just dumb as a rock. And I don't mind. That's enough for that. So.
Did you say something?
I was just speaking for myself. I'm not generalized here. Yeah, that too. Okay. The first, might as well start at the beginning, I guess. And fair warning, a fair bit of the show and tell on the early side of things was going to be Chip Lamb is en route, and this will turn out to be an adventure. He's somewhere over just a little bit, west of the New York state line, having smelled the serpentine belt in the stages of leaving this world. So he's currently scrounging around for tools and hydro pulleys and that sort of thing. Hopefully he'll be here a bit later. For those of you who don't know Chip, it's hard to imagine not at one point or the other. He's, of course, down out of Virginia. Up out of Virginia, I guess, and he was dragging along some stainless steel brake lines and some old parts. Just out of curiosity, how many stroker owners here? Okay, got V4. Okay, all right. So we got a pair. Then we get into real 900s. Okay, so we got a range here. And we got 9,000s and so on. So, all right.
When you asked about the cars, does that mean running or not running?
Oh no, that's
In the parking lot. Right.
in the parking lot. It's like mine. It's memories, cars that should have been, or cars that may be again someday. If you have intentions of having one, that qualifies. Now, again, didn't have any sort of an agenda. One of the things that comes up, of course, is just start with the basics and work on up. So might as well do that with with the old stuff. And quite honestly, I was up in the rafters last night, but didn't pull out as much as I thought I was going to because I figured that Chip would be here with his pile of stuff. But I'm just going to drag some stuff out of the leaves here. Kind of go through categories. A few of the older bits and pieces as we go along, or what I don't have here quite asked, but I slowly date ourselves. How many of you have ever had the pleasure of doing brake jobs this way? Okay, all right, good crew. It's amazing. Get the average technicians coming through, and this, great folks all, but start, doing this and hauling out what's in the little bag, and explain to them the process. When I started, it was 1968 with Saab and the old. If you've ever seen the old letterhead, 100 Waterfront Street in New Haven, that was where we moved to after Hingham, Massachusetts, and all that. That's where I joined Saab, and I started in the company car shop. And at that point, you're doing great jobs on secretaries' cars upstairs, and you knew they were really flush if they could afford to do a brake job where they bought the, the shoes and the linings both at the same time, because, most of the time you're sitting with the old, foot pedal stomping out the rivets and putting these guys back on. So it's above average crew for experience there. I've been lucky in that I stole so doggone much stuff, out of the dumpster way back then. I'm just now starting to have to look outside. You guys are still finding linings and all that good stuff where you have to? Yeah.
I get them relined by the race people
Okay.
with actually modern semi-metallic material.
Okay. Yeah, that's certainly one option. Well worth doing. When I did the a few years back when I did the company's 92, was lucky in that one of the other fellows here had worked for one of these tire and clutch places locally and had one of the classic old characters who, unfortunately, he's suffered the fate of 50 years of working with asbestos and doing 2 packs of Hamels a day, that was able to take and bond, all new linings and, for $10 a wheel or whatever it was. So it's still out there. You can, so you're doing, say, semi-metallic,
Yeah,
Yeah.
DS11, same as on the front stand.
okay, and that's the bond, and you're doing the bonded.
Those are easy because there's so many old cars that there's a big market for shoes.
Yeah, no, it can be done. It takes, I've gone the same route with other stuff where you just, and again, you go online, you go into Hemmings and there's no end of people that'll do that stuff. It's just, now you get into we've got to get rid of a little asbestos and there's a, dumping fee and everything else. So what used to be a couple of bucks is, now pushing 100 or better, but, it is there.
Bought a new set of shoes from a dealer here within a year too, so.
Yeah, it's always worth punching in. It's surprising what's there sometimes.
They weren't, they were, I don't know, $40 maybe, something like that.
Like I say, I haven't had to get, that desperate, so I've had to use the P word again. But,
I assume they're not asbestos at this point, unless you're pulling them out of the paybacks.
I suspect they are. We used to do the same thing with, these are obviously not, not brake linings, but, it's the same thing. If you were a little short on cash that week, you bought 2 of these and some rivets. It's the way it worked. Now, along with, with that, again, I'm preaching to the choir here, guys. If you have one of these cars, you probably know every twist and turn, but just, again, getting to the basics there. If you can find somebody, that'll bond, certainly well worth, for instance, usually you need to have somebody with a pretty decent sized shop to turn particularly the old drums with a small slime and or Woodruff key attachment that we had. Not everybody's got a spin wheel on their brake lathe will take that, but you go to an old timer and say, oh yeah, that's about like a 37 Ford rear axle and or thereabouts, and they've still got tooling for it, and they can turn them. Again, as you're aware, there's all sorts of specifications on the linings as far as where you can go for hardness. With company's 92, I intentionally went with something relatively soft, knowing that A, I wasn't going to be driving in the Rockies with it, and B, it was never going to get more than about 100 miles a year, maximum. So I wanted something that would stop, because that was always just anybody that's ever driven, in their original state, an all drum stroker, brakes were just sort of a suggestion at best.
Oh, it's slow down brakes.
Yeah, it slowed down. It gave you time to look for a soft spot. what it did, and particularly if you got into, again, I was just hoping I'd find the right bit in the pile here, but again, I guess what I'm building up to here in my usual rambling way is at this point, I probably spend more time on a restoration on brakes than I do pretty much anything in the rest of the car. You know, gearbox, whip through those in a day. Probably spend more time pulling off pieces, you know, doing lines, rebuilding this, you know, sourcing that. Just the margin for error isn't what it used to be. You know, the traffic, if nothing else, just the fact that we're used to driving stuff with ABS, and you get out and get into a stroker again, and you just mentally don't give yourself the, you know, 20 car lengths that it takes to, you know, and occasionally, boy, just, even when you know better, I was out, I guess 3-4 summers ago when we were, well,
Last summer.
no, that was, when we were out, you need to get out in the Midwest occasionally and run into that crowd, out around Meyer Garage and through there. Old Marty out there was Marty Adams and wife were, it's probably, excuse me, we're getting progress reports on air bills. 9,000. That's,
There you go.
he had a nice B engine. He could just cut the whole thing loose and not worried about it. Oh, let's see. We were turning drums. We were talking about lousy brakes. What you usually found when you finally got into one of those dogs was that enough time would elapse so you'd have no rear brakes and generally about, well, just getting back to Iowa. These things sort of take a tortuous path. But at any rate, Midwestern folks are some real good vintage cars out there. And there was an event, and Tom Downey showed up with Larry Williams 92, and it's, you know, pretty much original Larry Williams shape, and gave me a chance to drive it and drove it up to the place where we're staying, probably 15-20 miles away. And I about bought the farm on the way up, and then talking to Tom last summer, got down to the point where we figured out that there was a total of 1 wheel's worth of brake on that entire car, the way that, you know, the way that Larry was driving it there. We had that original setup there. You had this style in the back. This is your, you know, your classic single piston, 5/8, 7/8, 3/4, all different diameters, and handbrake all in one. Well, these were always locked up usually, and rear brakes didn't wear enough to, you know, keep everything moving. And then you had a double piston setup in the front, one top, one bottom, and usually one of those at C. So yeah, you had 1 wheel's worth of you know, brake on it, and you could tell driving it. Anyway, so you know, take the time. Certainly shoes. Again, you can get them bonded. The thing to do is to take and get somebody to turn the drums and radius grind the shoes at the same time. You find that the danger, you know, either to source them, you know, off the shelf. You get, it's something that we still have in stock. You buy them from Saab. Again, the radius here is a compromise at best as far as the diameter of the drum, and usually by the time you get to these rascals, the drums have been turned a few times, and you no longer have got anywhere close to the same. Now it's close, but certainly not if you're to go in and look at the contact between lining and drum there. Probably in the beginning you're on about a third of the shoe there. Whereas you get somebody that goes in, and again, you hate to think of what you did back before you knew, back before asbestos was a dirty word. Eric, would you mind picking that up?
Find it.
Yeah, they're all over the place. So after you riveted these on and took a deep breath while you're doing that, you know, what you had was usually Amco had a rig that you haven't used one, haven't seen one, fixture that would plant the shoe, had a lever that would rotate it around and bring it up against a sanding drum. And you had the ability to, adjust for diameter, and then you would take and, sand off the lining material, until you brought it down to the, yes, sir.
We got the deli guy on the horn.
Oh, kind of by all means, if you possibly can. It does, make a difference.
Is that a Napa type thing, or does that need to get a little more specialized to get that done?
Probably at this point, a little more special. The problem is, of course, it's a messy operation, and folks are no longer quite as cavalier about that as they used to be. So I remember we were being environmentally conscious if we put the cloth bag that caught the asbestos on it. Now that was that was a good day. So it gets harder. It's kind of like a sun machine that you're in quest of.
Get that damn thing.
The company threw ours out, so I've been tracking it. Gary is, for those who don't, Gary is a partner in crime here. He's originally from the great state of Maine, grew up on two strokes, and went off and joined the other portion of our happy family. But even though he works for the general, he still drives two strokes. So yeah, if you come across a nice radius grinder at a tag sale, it's one of the things I want to add to my fleet here, because it does make a difference. So that's part of the certainly part of the package. Lines, I've got, again, laying around different places, the old lines. Start to think about, these have never been on a car, but just how old these puppies are at this point. And again, if you're doing bullnose, like, that 63 out back there, that is still a single circuit system. And I don't know, how many of you ever had the pleasure of hearing that, at the worst time in the world, when you put your foot down, it's not a whole lot of fun. Now, again, depending on how much of a stickler for authenticity you are, you find the option now is there are a number of folks who are doing these in stainless steel covered flex line, which is your, kind of your classic race car, approach to things. Has the advantage of, again, from a daily driver standpoint, safety factors a whole lot. That's one thing on our museum fleet to go scrounging around and drag out the, the right line. But going down the road, case can be made for going with the steel coated. What'd you do on yours, Gary?
I did the braided stainless.
You did the braided stainless.
Yeah, what I did is, of course, if you look in the parts book, there's about 347 different parts for brake hoses. So I just took the original ones off and sent them to, I think it was Paragon out in California, and it was $72, I think, for all four.
Right.
And they just matched them up. So, and you can still buy the ones from Saab, but they've superseded, and basically what they do is they took the longest one, and that's the one you get. Right. But they were almost $40 a hose, so the stainless ones were cheaper by half.
Right.
Actually, if you take your old hoses to a good place that does hoses in big cities, they can redo the hose and put stainless steel on it, use your same fittings.
Right.
And for about $30 a piece.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you never, good point, you don't throw these away, even when they're blown. You wire the two ends together and put them in a box somewhere that time comes when you want it. But you also get typically a firmer pedal with the brake covered guys.
You get those examples of a good parts guy now that they ever put this.
Oh, yeah.
Which one did the time I was discussing that stuff.
Right. That's what I do with the weird stuff. The kids do smash, the 54 6x6.
Yeah, the guys willing to look in the net book, they have everything.
Yeah.
It really is amazing, the stuff that they got.
But the guys, most of the time, they don't make money or they don't want to bother. If you get the right guy, they'll open the book, they have a picture of everything in the world.
Right. Yeah, I've got a few of those here from EIS and whatnot. And you just spend the time.
Right, spend the time.
Yeah, they could come up with shoes. That's what for the rear. Nothing else.
you know, a lot of times if a picture's not available in the back of those books, there's all these kinds of dimensions. Like you said,
Right.
you just gotta spend the
Race
time,
24 threads.
Right.
Male, planner.
then you could finagle something together.
Make sure you know what the threads are going in, because they used quite a array of different ones,
Yeah.
particularly near those 60s.
And as Gary said, you find this a blinding array, if you get type 1, type 2, and then they'll go back, you know, type 1 and third or whatnot. It was whatever Lockheed had real cheap that month. Is what they, you know, what they were doing.
Jack, do you upgrade those old cars to dual cylinder, or is that one reason? I know you can't do anything practical.
I'll find out on that one. I can't imagine why not. The 64, we went to the, you know, dual circuit,
Or pedal brake.
and it was still 4-pedal, yeah. So it, and the Sun had circuit for
Yeah,
it.
right.
So, you know, of course, that's everybody's favorite master, but, you know, as long as you got one for 4. As long as you mention the masters there, you know, that gets a little harder to match typically, and what I've been doing is using white post restorations, and I've got some flyers. Well, I've got, you know, a flyer, and the last one I did business with them, not to, you know, again, send in any particular direction, but and again, you look through Hemmings, and you find there are no end of folks that have made a pretty good business out of sleeving wheel cylinders, master cylinders. I just have used white post because of my reputation. They're certainly one of the more popular ones, and my contact has been good with them over the phone. They're willing to take the time to talk to you, and they offer a variety of services from just sleeving a master cylinder on up through. Last time I did it for about $192, which sounds pretty bad until you look at our final pricing on master cylinders that we don't have anymore anyhow. You know, I was looking for a,
5-year-old
yeah, for $192, they, you know, they sleeve them, they de-blast them, they rebuild them with new rubbers. They must have the world's biggest collection, because all that stuff is universal. You'll find that you get into the, you know, this bore, that bore, and you're off and running. And believe it, a peace of mind. We've all gone the route of taking apart. You got an old torpedo master cylinder off the bullnose there, and you run the home through it about 100 times, and you get to the point where you can only see little pits anymore. And you know, and then you put 2 turns of thread under the, you know, or 3 turns or 4 turns of thread in the step on the piston to get the seal out to the edges, and you know, it's all right when you're 21 and you know, you are going to live forever, but you know, it's a whole lot better to at this point. And the doggone things, they sleeve with copper, brass, copper. Yeah, one of the two. There are folks who deal with stainless as well. And at that point, you've got a surface that is going to last for a good long while. So it's just, for my money, hello.
Hi, man.
Yeah. Are you accompanied or, yeah,
Not this.
not this time, okay?
He's got it wrong.
Okay, well, fine to see.
White post doesn't work though too for lifetime.
Yeah, when you do the,
Your lifetime run.
Yeah.
Do
do the $192 or whatever, it's,
$225.
it's $225, okay, it's a lifetime. Yes, sir.
I'm ongoing, need to go back to White Post after about 3 years, but, since then, if you're not worried about originality, Tilton and Girling cylinders, which are, pretty much the same, you have to alter the length of the push rod, they're like $65 a piece. So, and you can buy different, if you want different ratios, so buy different bores.
Okay.
But no, you know, then again, you lose your originality. So, yeah. I like brake.
Yeah, that's nice to have. I have good brakes at least. Yes,
I had to rebuild a Range Rover master cylinder a month ago.
okay.
And, I could get a spare part from Hanover for $2,400 US. White clothes cost 200.
Yeah, that's a better deal. Your source is, again, catalog or where you,
Pegasus.
Where?
Pegasus.
Pegasus,
Yeah,
okay.
you can also get the clutch.
The clutch, the drilling with the funny
Nope.
cap on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I use
And the race car guys,
Yeah.
that's why they're from.
Okay.
And also give Bud Clark a call because he's recently been stainless for 150.
Okay.
I got that done with my sonnet.
Right.
And it's polished. He gets him to polish it in there, and it's a mirror finish.
Yep.
So
Yeah, a lot of avenues out there. Just, yeah, if problem I have is with any of this stuff is, again, you go back too far to where 125 was two entire parts cars, you know, and maybe a driver. And it's, but you just have to face up that, you know, do it right at least once there. And, you know, it's, in the end, it ends up being awful, you know, it's relatively cheap in the long run. Okay, you guys are ahead of me in most areas here. What have you been doing for, I was gonna, again, Larry called me months and months and months ago and was gonna collect all sorts of good stuff. And, time went by and, you know, I was down last night, you know, and poking through the barn looking for things. Generally two styles of, you know, brake lines, as far as flares. The classic American style is, of course, your double flare, double 45, where you're inverted V. Whereas Saab, you're running into the European bubble flare. You can get, of course, flaring tools, you know, for both styles. And there are times when you just end up making lines. Again, preaching to converted here, but there's nothing that just puts a shiver down my spine more than getting into a car and running across compression fittings and copper tubing for the ice maker. You know, down the floor pan of the car, and it just there's some people that get away with that stuff, but I have no idea how or why. Yeah.
Can you buy the various thread size fittings to, you know, make your own things in an engineering kit type of thing?
Yeah, pretty much, just about any auto parts store I can buy the line and has the right thread on the end and then just put a flare on it.
Just again, it's a bubble flare other than which the Europeans, but you know, Snap-on, Eastwood, everybody sells the you know, flaring kits to do this. So you can and you can buy the line in 25-foot lengths, or you can make up your own lines. You get into you find it's hard getting 90-degree bends like this, but there are again a variety of good tube vendors on the market as well. Okay, so we get the basics of a real system, a real simple drum system there. Get into, and again, certainly welcome your input here. Haven't done a thing about fluids yet, which kind of gets into, this is not, I was looking to lay my hands on an old torpedo master cylinder, which I've got 3 or 4 of around here somewhere in a safe logical place. But awful darn close to, folks probably recognize this as being, yeah, Clutchmaster, 9000 Clutchmaster. Came off of, matter of fact, spot where most of you are, that last weekend's project with one of the kids' cars. And got to the end, and the thing had always been a miserable son of a gun to beat out. And it just pretty much refused to. And got into, I suspect, these are kind of notorious, but it's brings up the subject of contamination and brake fluid in general. How many of you, that's a long time question here, manuals for years and years and years and years have always recommended it on a regular basis. You do fluid changes, brake fluid changes, and then you get into how often does it happen, and it's pretty on that too.
That's what you call regular.
Yeah, it's not like, okay. any system is, susceptible to, of course, the danger with the fluid getting over age is that, brake fluid by nature is, the term is hygroscopic there, sucks up moisture, just sitting there. Take a brand new tin of brake fluid and leave the cap off for a day, and you find that your boiling point has gone down, pick a number, 20 degrees or so, just in that period of time due to the amount of moisture that you've sucked up out of the atmosphere, and it just gets worse as time goes by. We're probably not as tuned into it around here because unlike the Rockies there, you can try to think a couple of weeks ago, you come across Route 80 and see you are now on the highest point on Route 80, east of the Mississippi, and it's like 2,200 feet or something there. So it's not a real big deal, but we always used to get one of the days of the early 900s where we had the full hood louvers on the back of the hood there, one set right over the they were matched, sort of balanced there, and you had one set right over top of the master cylinder. And how many of you seen that lovely big ugly black boot we finally ended up putting over that? Used to just get enough moisture down so that the high rollers leaving LA for Vegas would lose the clutch by the time they hit around 5,000 foot or so. That was usually the first thing that went. And it was the reaching the boiling point on the brake fluid there, which was also feeding the clutch system. Real good case can be made for changing every couple of years. Again, getting into maybe you've sleeved your master cylinder at this point, but your slaves out at the other end are still either cast iron or aluminum bore, and certainly susceptible to contamination and corrosion. Something else that, getting back to why I was waving this thing around, the reason why it was so hard to bleed, and why these are fairly notorious for being that way, is you'll find that in order to fill these, in order to function, you need to get fluid out of the reservoir into the master cylinder. So there is a small port. Follow the line through here, a small port to the side, where the fluid feeds in just a gnat Swiss or maybe ahead of the forward edge of the seal here. And one of the classic problems you run into with contamination is not only do you get corrosion, but seals start to go to hell, particularly being somebody who's put Lord knows what fluid in there, rather than improved DO2-4 brake fluid. Seals swell just a tad, and you get to the point where you're covering over this filter work, and you have one hell of a time. And what's even, same thing can happen on brakes. Usually brake masters got adjustable push rod, at least the older ones did. But again, if that port was not open, you have a system that would be all right when it's cold, but as you gain a little heat, things expand. And pretty soon you have self-releasing clutch or self-applying brakes, and you can lose it, the whole thing cool down, and everything went back to its original size. Okay, so just again, common sense. Everybody knows about changing fluid on a regular basis.
How about the silicone coats?
I have, again, speak from personal prejudice, not experience. I don't use it. There was a real flurry of activity, that's your dot 5, real flurry of activity, 10, 15 years back, I'd have to say. The theory being that it did not hold moisture in suspension, that's kind of good news theoretically, like the regular fluids do. The bad news was it doesn't hold water in suspension. And anybody got personal experience with dot 5?
Yeah, I used to do in my 544.
Yeah.
The rear cylinders used to, corrode up every year. Since they put that in, it was great.
That works for you? I'm not.
And it's a problem. So
Also, that's perfect.
I tried it on a couple of my 900s, and I found eventually that going back to dot 4, brakes work much better and much firmer pedal because what I found happening with Dock 5 is as you try to bleed it, you get microscopic air bubbles get in the fluid and they never come out. So
much-
you're always pushing on that little cushion of air.
It's much thinner.
Unless you gravity bleed it or, pressure bleed it or suction bleed it, probably is the best. To make sure the air doesn't get in. But, I found lately I converted my car back to Dock 4 and the clutch and the brake work much better. I have a much more look at it than I ever did with the Dock 5.
And I think the fact that we have on the seal is question.
So the recommendation always was you wanted new rubber, you didn't want to do a straight swap. That was usually came up. If you're doing, yes, I'm doing a complete overhaul and, then that was the recommendation. But
Well, and what I've, in talking to, because I went through this whole discussion last spring, right, basically people are, yeah, if you're doing a restoration of a car that's gonna be, in the barn for the next 20 years, and driven 100 miles a year, you might want to do it because it will cut down on corrosion. You're gonna take the thing out and drive it. The consensus seems to be you're better off use Dock 4 and just change it, right? So, not to say that people aren't successful at using it. It's just if you talk to 10 people, it seems like 8 of them are in the Dock 4.
And Dock 5 will ruin all Sonnet pressure sensors, the little
Okay.
sensors. Yeah, Bud told me that he had it on his race car and every year he had to change the brake light sensor.
Okay.
So if you're running a Sonnet,
Yeah, I had
wouldn't
that
recommend
problem
it.
too.
Yep, it goes, and you have to find one.
We have a substitute for that part. Their substitute book.
Another problem with the silicone is under high temperatures, it becomes compressible fluid, which is why they don't use Dock 5 in the race.
Also, you can get racing fluid with much higher boiling point than they use Dock 5.
So my preference, just purely that, is just change frequency, which reminds me of a year overdue on the 92. I think the brakes are kind of like, the old painting the George Washington Bridge story where you get to one end and you start again. It's about time to go through the fleet again. Gets into, along as you're rebuilding stuff there, I just feel real funny about holding holding up a box that says Lucas on it. It says this
Prince of Darkness.
you think this is good, yeah. But,
Shouldn't have any electrical wires.
there's no electrical, what it is, Lucas has actually taken over from Girling. This is the old red rubber, Girling rubber lube here. And, nothing exotic or high tech or anything about it. Lord only knows. They've been building it a long time. I'm not sure. It's just special grease for use on rubber components in or near to DOT, brake fluid. This is still available through Saab here. 3001-849. I laid the box up there, the number's written on there. You can get it, I'm sure, any place that, again, you guys get sources for just about anything. Now, it used to be that probably the first, as much formal training as I ever had on brakes was always, you don't, first of all, you don't wash the rubber bits off in the parts tank, and, B, you dip everything in brake fluid before you put it together. Problem with, lubing up with brake fluid, which may sound like a good idea, is that if you get looking at what normally goes wrong with master cylinders, brake calipers, anything else, is you have got inevitably between the last seal and the dust boot here, you've got a area which is going to be open to the atmosphere and going to have, in the case of, visualize it, the puck on a disc brake piston there, is going to have metal surface sliding by in near proximity. And that's when you look at what hangs up a, disc brake piston, that's the area that hangs up is that little 8/3/16 of an inch between the dust boot, and the lip seal there. And if you go on and nicely wet all that down with brake fluid, ease the piston on through while you're rebuilding there, that's 8/3/16 of an inch in area coated with something that's going to go ahead and soak up moisture and start your red rust in. So I always, when I'm rebuilding anything, be it master cylinders, wheel cylinders, disc brakes, my assembly lube is always at the red, Girling red grease. I'm sure there are good equivalents out there. That's just, well, it's in the Saab pricing system, which means I get it through here free, which is is a fairly good use. But I didn't spend money for it if I had to. Anybody else use something along that line that you have?
Well, ICE manufacturing, they have this really good assembly. It's a liquid lubrication for brake parts. And it claims that it does not absorb moisture, but it's strictly for assembly purposes. Very slippery, works excellent on rubber components. That's what I've always used. I've never seen that though.
This is, it's a fairly,
Just like a.
My understanding of that's gel brake fluid.
I'm sorry?
My understanding of that is gel brake fluid.
Gel brake fluid.
Yeah, there was something added to make it form a gel.
Knowing English, it's probably a manufacturing mistake of some sort. Yeah. Okay.
It's like a grease.
Yeah, it's essentially, it's a,
It's obviously can be petroleum based. So,
and of course, the recommendation always with the, I'm not sure how long it's been since somebody had, the old natural rubber seals and all that sort of thing, but it's obviously compatible with, whatever you're using there. It's a great assembly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We use a similar product from Handbrake.
I'm sorry?
We use a similar product from Handbrake.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, you would expect that they would they'd have something along those lines. Okay. Again, Chip, I've got manuals, parts manuals, shop manuals on all the old stuff and obviously the new stuff here. If you, I'll move on here unless we've got some specific questions on on drum brake systems. I'm not sure. I know we've got at least one. The ABS. We'll get to ABS. We'll get to traction control. We'll get to the more modern stuff as we go along here. Yeah.
I guess, if you want to talk about it when Chip gets here to talk about these, that's fine, but, somebody at Saab had a long cold winter, and they let some hockey guy talking to the football screw. Cylinders in with bleeders through the valve. And then, to add insult to injury, they put those proportion valves under the back seat, and I can't get the air out. So, I don't know, you got any thoughts on that, or anybody else have that wisdom? Turn the car upside down.
Yeah, they get into why they did some of the things they did. I'm not sure there's good answers.
Have you tried reverse bleeding them from the bleeders from back? Pressure. Yeah, I mean, I a couple of Peugeots, you have to reverse bleed the clutch or you can't bleed it. So.
Using a mighty vac for that, or what do you?
Actually, the Peugeot recommended method is you bleed the brakes, then you connect the one brake bleeder to the clutch bleeder and keep bleeding. That's great.
Yes, sir.
There was a question before about this solid brake light.
Okay.
In my Rally 96, I used there's a four-way tube, a four-way cross tube, and it's from a bone house probably. And I stick a modern sensor in the top of that, and I'll put the master cylinder in the bottom and out.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you can actually look at electric cylinder.
They don't have to go to sit.
Probably.
Yeah, there's, again, there's stuff out there. Leaking techniques, as long as we're down that road. There are, lots of methods out there, and again, everybody's got their favorite. I'm glad to hear yours. Anybody got one of these gems here? It's fairly common. It's a Saab special tool, but also gets sold through Snap-on. And this is a vacuum bleeder running off the shop air. And you'll find that there's canister obviously here where you're going to purge. Again, doing a change here, you end up filling up, probably to here. I'll go through several bottles of brake fluid before I'm done. All you're doing is tying on a nipple and holding down the handle until you get clean looking fluid coming out. If you're doing a large volume, I'm not sure that's probably appropriate for the occasional user, but these work very well on a fluid change. There's several other options. Probably the best of all, if you haven't, if you're going to go out and buy anything, is one of these guys, the Highline Mighty Vac, which will go from, I guess, Snap-on about $75 or so, and then for the metal one, and then you get Harbor Freight. Sometimes you get them down closer to 55 or so. Anyway, if you have not had the pleasure, you end up with, there's actually two generations of these. There's a plastic one, and then the big spender metal version. And you get booklet telling you the wonders of negative pressure and all its applications. And you also get a whole pile of adapters. And again, from the standpoint of occasional use, and there are a lot of applications, quite honestly, this works better than that does. It's just a little more labor intensive, but
It works great, because you can test all your vacuum operating things.
oh yeah. This is where you find your Hoover valve leaks. Yeah. Everybody knows what a Hoover valve is, right? Yeah, the half of the crew.
Is a Hoover valve like an exhaust check valve?
No,
Because I just ran across mine, I had to replace the boot, and I didn't know what the valve was. And
let me go grab a Hoover valve here. I'll be right back here. Who named it? Yeah, it sounds. I mean, it's one of these where
So you know you need to fix it.
yeah, you know what it is. This little gem is double Hoover valve. First saw it with the first 16 valve turbos back in '85 on the 900s, and what this does is it is spliced into. If you can visualize the airflow from the turbo through the intercooler, up from the intercooler to the intake manifold, and you have this column of air which is buzzing along at a pretty good rate. If you're going along in full boost, you got a fair bit of mass there, and all of a sudden somebody slams the throttle closed because somebody pulls out in front of them. And so the throttle is closed, you have this column of air going slap up against a closed throttle plate, and it is going to bounce back. And it can do some funny things to your airflow in the intake tract, and affect the way that we're measuring the air mass. Because the early cars were all MAF-based mass airflow sensor, the old hot wire sensor, where we calculated how much air was going in by measuring the mass of air flowing over a little wire. And this would give it the heebie-jeebies if you didn't, or the airflow rate. So what they did was kind of solved it the same way you solve a engine oil pump running away with itself. You have a relief valve, which is going to open up and dump pressure back on the suction side. So we have this bypass valve. This is the turbo bypass valve. And then on the traction control cars, and self-created problems, so we have a turbo bypass valve. Typical Swedish engineering solution. You add on one thing to take care of another. Anyway, these are a spring, a valve, and a diaphragm. Diaphragm made of rubber, diaphragm which eventually kind of loses its zest for life and will begin to inflate. So should put the adapter on here. I'll see if I can force it on. Just can't draw a vacuum no matter what. Okay, this type of leak here on a car, which is its entire heart and soul is, oh, this comes around, you see there's a hole in the diaphragm here, probably courtesy of a screwdriver. But at any rate, the fuel system who has to know in great deal every last gram of air that went through and where it is and where it's going, and this just upsets it completely. And you get stalling and a variety of problems. You can tell it's working because it moans and groans and hoots and carries on. Therefore, hooter valve.
Instead of a shot back, usually for me, it's a piece of rubber hose followed by a glass of mouthwash.
Okay, yeah. Well, this is quick and dirty. Or you can just assume that it's probably bad, but yes, sir.
I have not had great luck using my evac brakes. I end up with a lot of air bubbles coming around the leader screw.
Yep, that they will. But it's air after the fact there.
Can't tell when you've got it lead because you don't know whether the bubble's coming through the hose or courtesy of the leader screw or.
Teflon tape on good first.
Yeah.
Teflon tape is used first, no grease.
Yeah, they make the point here, if that bothers you, you put a couple wraps of Teflon tape around the bleeder screw to keep the air infiltration. You're 100% right. If you've got the screw loose enough to bleed, it's going to be loose enough to suck some air.
Well, he brought me his toy that he made.
Yeah, I made a power brake bleeding tool. I got the car going from the Basically, it's a plug sprayer with a couple quick release valves on it, and I scrunched up a cap from a master cylinder out of a boneyard. Anyway, so
Yep. Hold that thought.
Okay.
What you can do is put wheel bearings grease around the bleeders.
So that looks.
Right.
Which one? The Lucas grease work here?
Probably, because you don't have to worry about getting back up line into the, you don't want to use anything that is potentially going to, contaminate. Anyway, I don't have all the right bits here that these kind of migrate to pillar post, but you have a cap. Usually getting back to the original function, if you manage to get around the air leak, say, you have a hose which allows you to go down into the bottom here, and that way when you evacuate, you are pulling fluid. You've got to be end up with the connection to the wheel cylinder down under the fluid while it's not the back feed air. On the same premise, you can turn the thing around and fill it with fluid. And that's what I was asking if you on your Peugeot there, if you were pressure bleeding, you can. Top port on this will take it, and you have pressure at that point, and the top seats well enough on this so you can pressure bleed off this as well, reverse flush and pressure bleed. Or you can go up, for instance, you've got, of course, a little feed line coming off of the brake reservoir. You can pressure bleed if you want to go this direction. You can vacuum. All else fails. I frequently, if I get a stubborn customer there, you sometimes end up with using 2 or 3 techniques before you're done. I almost inevitably polish it off with one of the kids and the pedal, and it usually comes down to down to that.
If all else fails, you could gravity.
Yep. I mean, there's
time. Just time consuming, but.
Yep. A lot of the systems are laid out, so you just take and let them hang there, and just have to wander by occasionally and top up the reservoir. Okay, another favorite technique. First started seeing it with the hydraulic clutch on the long nose cars was of course pressure bleeding, and Okay, you can tell it's out of a different shop than this one because it is not nearly as sanitary looking, but this is the, again, pick on the English because that's, if I go back far enough, that's where my roots are, so I figure that, but this is the famous Gunnison's Easy Bleed, if you've never, anybody know Gunnison's? Okay. Yeah. From the folks that brought you the color tune engine tuning system there, which I meant to grab, but I said, no, that's too hokey. I was going to bring mine in. They, you don't know what Gunnison's color tune is.
They were great.
Pardon?
They were great.
Yeah, it's actually it's one of these weird ideas, but it works. I probably should have grabbed it. First time I saw the Gunnison name there was you get a little, in my case, a little black box. You open it up, and inside, nestled in velvet and all that, is a little spark plug with a and you look where the porcelain should be, and you've got a electrode coming through, surrounded in clear acrylic. And then you've got a skinny little extension that comes up and a black sleeve that goes over that with a mirror on the end that you screw this whole shooting match into the plug hole and hook up the plug wire and look in the combustion chamber while you're twiddling the screws on the carburetor or whatever you're doing. And they have this lovely wall chart which tells you in glowing color and great detail exactly what's going on. They have somebody spent a lot of time coming up with, if this then that, based on this this color tune setup, and it's one of these. You stop and think about it. Again, not to keep picking on poor Gary over there, but he's got an engineering background. So and you go to engine labs, and they have engines with glass windows in the cylinder walls, and you can see the orange flame and the blue flame and any colored flame you want there as you fiddle with it all. I think you can see the flame fronts gliding and the flame fronts propagating, all that good stuff. Okay, well the other brainstorm there was, and yours is built on, say again, master cylinder caps. So in your Gunson's Easy Bleed kit, you get as many caps with the holes pre-drilled in them. The standard in the old P4 days was a spare master cylinder cap with a bolt-in valve stem and a bicycle pump. That was the pressure blade technique there.
I say I don't have to keep pumping.
Beg pardon?
I don't have to keep pumping. I got the quick release so that I keep that head air in the blood sprayer the whole time.
Okay, using the old Saab or another?
Yeah, that's my 9.
Oh, I mean, pardon?
I did it when I did my 9,000.
Okay, yeah. And what makes this a decent setup is the way this was set up. It's easy enough to build one. You got a lab bottle with a tube going down the bottom, which is your connection out. So it's continually refilling at this stage of the game. And again, your idea, you could use a Sierra Roebuck or anybody else's bug spray there. Yes, sir.
For what it's worth, the cap in the Gunson's kit, that they had one with 50 miles, 900, just fine, but I couldn't find anything that would give me good fit on the 96 power. And then I went to the rally car, tilted, and the cap was exactly the same. So those caps are available.
Okay, good.
So I made it out of the old cap. None of the caps have been. I was wondering if Sammy Davis Jr. got his glass eye.
Let's go back to 20.
Yeah. At any rate, neat thing about this was that it snaps down onto the closest tire of the master cylinder, and that's that's your pressure. So until your tire goes flat or the bottle runs dry, you just run from corner to corner, leading out the system. Works like a charm. I had a friend dragged over from England. Where'd you get yours?
I borrowed it from a neighbor.
Oh, okay.
British cars.
Okay.
So what's your preferred method?
That with the caps that I made out of the telephone camera.
These, again, some form of pressure bleed, whether you use Now you've got you're putting brake fluid in the bug sprayer then, and,
No, actually what I did is,
Or just
like
use
the
it-
9,000, the master cylinder, the fluid chambers are so large that it's easy enough to do that.
okay, so you're just using the bug sprayer to pressurize then?
Right, I drew off, all the crap out of the cylinder, I filled, and then, pressurized the system and cracked the valves, and drew off all the old fluid, filled it with new fluid, and just pressurized it with the bug spray.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's incidentally recommend going and siphon out turkey baster or whatever, you get all the old crud out of there,
So,
beforehand. One of the reasons, incidentally, for liking methods like this, vacuum lead or pressure lead, as compared to doing the whole thing manually, is harsh reality that sometimes you're dealing with cars that have not been religiously maintained, and if you can visualize what's happening, you've got a system which is, it's filthy, but your pedal is up high, you got a hard pedal, and all of a sudden you're there doing one of these and you're into a portion of the bore that no man's gone before, for a long time, and all of a sudden the stalactites and stalagmites grab that poor rubber seal and off you go. Obviously, at that point, you really ought to, go through the whole thing, but sometimes it's Sunday afternoon, and if you can avoid creating a problem by vacuum or pressure bleeding, it's far better.
I was also under the impression too that you couldn't generate enough force to get down and bleed the clutch cylinder. With that too, so.
I've done them, but boy, it's frustrating because I don't know how many times it's like this car here. It's a matter of in 20 minutes into the bleeding procedure, you should have been washing your hands and putting your tools away. And you're still trying to get a pedal on the whole thing. And
Like I ran my 2 quarts through the system, and I didn't spill a drop. It was great.
yeah.
It's great. Oh,
But whatever method you use, whether vacuum works in its place, pressure like this, works great. Again, as long as you're careful the advantage with using, of course, the commercial pressure bleeds went out there on the old classic ball type where you had a diaphragm, and best methodology is where you keep the air away from the brake fluid altogether. Less chance of aerating. And then it's always hard to, you finish bleeding and you got a half pint of fluid in here, and what do you do with it at that point? If you're meticulous, you throw it away at that point. That's certainly the proper thing to do. It's always hard, but brake fluid is something you don't want to be taking a chance on contamination, and certainly don't want to leave it in, store it in there, because it's just going to wick so much moisture out of the air in a short period of time that you're certainly not fixing a whole lot by introducing that into the next system you work on.
John, you comment on sequence, do laundry lines first?
Our shop manuals have always always broken it down into longest line first. That is the technique. I follow it when I can.
Where's the clutch fit?
Beg pardon?
Where's the clutch fit?
That's a separate item. You do that first, it's last, whenever, that doesn't matter. It's a matter of when you're working through the master cylinder, it's supposed to be furthest away. Again, just tricks of the trade. There are some shortcuts you can, I want to say shortcuts, but things that save you, time and labor. Of course, all this stuff ought to be bench bled, before it goes near the car if you're dealing with a master cylinder. Again, keep thinking things I should have grabbed. Very, very inexpensive. Bench bleeding kits are simple screw-in fittings and a couple of plastic lines, or barring that, you've got old ones, kicking around that may be master cylinder. You just form them so you're back up into the reservoir, and you just sit there and new master cylinder reservoir full. It's got self-contained certainly, and stroke stroke the master cylinder on the bench until all your air is cleared out. I will, again, nice thing about this and being able to go either pressure or vacuum is, I'll take and fill the lines. Again, you can reverse pressure bleed going from the bleed screw back up. If you're living right, you can get the lines full, the master cylinder full, hook everything up and have the pedal right then if you're having a real good day. Every once in a while, clutch jobs. You take and hold the pedal halfway down with a prop. Break the lines, cap them. Make sure that your line is full. Make the stroke get a little dribble out, bolt together. 25% of the time, I'll be right there, without having to bleed them. If you do that in advance.
That's the work on your food though, too. So try to use pressure clean that plug using those. It's the same master cylinder.
Okay, moving from there into disc brakes, I guess. And again, I was going to do. Everybody recognize this, Jim?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's not even rusted or stuck yet. Well, it's not enough pieces to be stuck, but
Brown, it's a full brown.
big part.
A full bottom brown.
Yeah, of course, that's your classic old V4 pivoting caliper. For those of you that haven't run into that setup, it looks, when you open up the box and take the pads out, and the backing plates are like this, and the pad surfaces are like this, you look at it and say, what in the world were they thinking of? It's a single pivot here, so that it actually made it easy to do a check for lining wear. Is if you looked under and the thing was sitting like this, you had good linings. If it was sitting like this, it was time to, put on the new ones. It had to be English, but it was, compared to what went before, it was good enough. So that's what's going to end up on that white 63 if I can just manage to find two 65 vintage axles so that I can have the disc brakes on the outside and the rubber donuts on the inside.
Now, John, were those all the V4s with that style and all the two-stroke were the two-piston ones, or is that?
You want to go with 4-bolt, 5-bolt.
Okay. Those are all the 5 volts.
Those are all 5 bolts of this, yeah. All 5 bolts of this. All 4 bolts are, I don't know where my collection is, but again, to get into the weird and wonderful phase, these are for your car.
Didn't have to take that part off, I guess.
No. Yeah. But this is where the original disc brakes, when you get back to the sports and the GTs and the Monte Carlos, where you have a conventional Lockheed dual piston. Of course, this whole purpose of the swinging thing here is that was an early single piston setup.
Dual piston ones could be a pretty sweet piece.
Oh, it's nice. They just probably cost money. Yeah. So, that was, I think, probably the limitation there. So any 5 volts, were that swinging caliper setup. Okay, let me get into, get into a box of, get into the trivia quiz. Who knows what this is? Carburetor. That's cover for your AFB Carter there. So, no.
He's covered for
Fast
power
arms,
plant.
Okay, how about what about if I threw this into the equation?
Oh my god.
Oh my God.
We never used the cover.
Never used the cover.
No, we just brown.
You got both arms there? Yeah. Okay. This is affectionately known as the dog dish. And this is a great piece of technology. This isn't the right stuff, but you can visualize. Well, without tearing it. Okay, we have aluminum. Talk about semi-metallic pads. We have all metallic pads. We have had aluminum brake pads for a while there, and it might make more sense if I hold up this, Jim. Okay. All right. This was actually predates 900, of course. This goes on to your 75 on up 99s, and then on up through 87 on the 900s. And this is the work of the devil, is what this is. Anyhow, it's English, yeah. It's just amazing. Some of the best machinists and individual technicians I've ever met are English. And you put 20 of them in a room and give them a title and they do something stupid. Anyhow, we had brake squeal and brake pulsation problems, and one of the again, just you marvel at the fact that somebody even think of trying this, but we sent out a kit that was the dog dish here. That's just like we have the bug sprayer for cleaning injectors and the hooter valve. We've got the dog dish, and these guys. And you put coarser emery cloth, snapped them over here, took out the original pads, and installed these in the front rotors here on whatever rotor you ascertained was giving you the pulsation. Actually, from a diagnostic standpoint, it wasn't too bad because you had if it still moved here, the front handbrake lever. And so you put the front end of the car up in the air and put it in gear and manually apply the front handbrake. And the one that did that while you were applying it was the one where you had your pulsation. So then to get rid of the pulsation, because again, if you go back far enough there, if you have like a 79 900, what do you do to get the brake rotor off of one of those puppies?
By wheel bearing.
Yeah, by a wheel bearing, yeah. Again, a stroke of genius, the rotor is inboard of the hub. So you had to pull the hub and wheel bearing off and apart and change the rotor. So that was not something you're going to do, and that was before the days of you get into before the days of these guys here. Of course, eventually people came out with the on-car brake blades, which we can talk about later on. Boxes seen better days, but neat little invention. You take the caliper off, hang it out of the way, bolt this on where the caliper ought to be, and put the car in gear and turn your rotor in place.
Can I stay here and play for a couple months?
Pardon?
Can I stay here and play for a couple of
Oh,
months?
yeah, right. Wait till I gotta get my machine tools, I gotta get the turret laid, and then you come. Yeah. I just got the bead blaster, and now we're gonna get the powder coating moving next.
Pull the wheel bearing out of the negative.
Yeah, we know you.
What would happen is people would blow it apart in the process.
Pulled it out with a.
They ruin it.
You had a pretty good chance of ruining it if you weren't careful.
I was gonna say, no, I've done that without replacing the wheel bearings.
Support the inner race.
Well, you gotta do some clever.
Yeah, no, it wasn't mandatory, but that was a practical effect, or it was, oh shit, I forgot, when you pull the portion apart.
Spindles do fit the earlier cars.
Beg pardon?
Later spindles do fit the earlier cars. You get the rotor that you don't have to take the whole suspension apart to displays.
Now you get into what's the variation, and unfortunately I'm losing it, but you get into you could spawn when you got the cars where you had no centers in the alloy wheels, because,
Right.
doing the variations. Sorry, that was what the That was the dogfish. One of our finer moments. But
What did the dog dish have to shoot?
oh, okay, sorry. You know what? Well, that's why I'm just going to check his arm for stars here. You had this is still in the nut and stud days. So you're sitting there because you had to substitute sandpaper blocks, and you had to sit there, and this tip over the hub so that you didn't use your shirt sleeve wound up in the. That was when the dog just came in.
Place with duct.
Okay, in the service manual, did they specify that? Just like,
It was an SI, I think.
It's still available, that thing?
It never made the manual, did it?
I'm sorry?
Never made the manual, did it? I think it was just bullet.
I think it was Bullen. Yeah, I'd have to look at my old, yeah. Another bit of trivia, which, is this the pedal car, or what Saab was that thing?
99.
99 Handbrake, yeah, or, well, this happens to be 99. Yeah, or 93 maybe, yeah. Okay.
Anyone actually ever replace those?
Did they ever work? Yeah, do you know the whole history behind, well, I'm assuming the history why we've got that, why we end up with that on the 99s, because of course in the 96s, you always had the handbrake on the rear. And again, that was the beginning certainly of where, you know, in the early generation you had this fellow, and then the later one, of course, you had the spreader bar and the cables. How many of you, I always used to go through, I always carried a tow rope anyhow, but the primary application of the tow rope was, you know, when you loan the car to somebody and you actually use the handbrake in the winter, or handbrake, you know, ever, you needed to sneak underneath and get the tow hook around this so you could release the brake so you could drive away. Kind of, you know, again, you look back and you marvel at the fact that we stayed in business all those years. Yeah, and as I love things dearly, but just to have, you know, to build cars like that. But of course, everybody did. That was the, you know, that was, you know, we looked down on lots of people there. You just don't drive Fiat. Okay, getting into why, you know, why this? If it worked, what was the best thing about the rear handbrake on the 96? Quick turns, yeah, handbrake turns. I never saw it, but reputedly there were towns in Sweden where they'd have on the main street traffic signs posted for no Saab turns. Yeah. So I'm not sure, but what, you know, the 99s with the handbrake on the front wasn't a being, the Swedes can be painfully upright and law-abiding. My apologies, but you are Swedish, I presume. Yeah, okay. Just I was over there back before OBD2 came out in onboard diagnostics, second generation, that hit us in '96, and was spending a fair bit of time at the factory in '94 and '95, and came out of a meeting where, you know, the engineers were trying very, very hard to figure out what the U.S. government actually meant with the laws we were writing, which I don't think the folks that wrote them much knew what they were writing. You know, so the Swedes were trying to interpret it, and one of the leaders there, one of the group leaders, grabbed me in the way. I said, "Tell me, John, you know, honestly, don't you think that we Swedes are just too honest? You know, shouldn't we be like the Italians that have rules for everything and don't obey any of them?" That's kind of the. That's a neat thing about Sweden. You go over there, and I'm sure, well, it is changing, but even so, you can do things on the honor system, and just people, even if they tell a Norwegian joke, which is of course the equivalent of one of our Polish jokes, they'll tell a Norwegian joke, and then they'll almost look guilty about it afterwards. My wife shouldn't have done that, but it was so much fun, you know. Neat folk. But
you mean to tell me they couldn't figure that, you know, they couldn't go to somebody at GM and ask them about what they thought? you know, about the rules? Like you said, the engineers were trying to figure out the,
Now, this was,
sarcastically, I'm asking
Yeah.
you that.
I'm not sure GM had any.
No, nobody wanted
at that point.
Oh, what was going on there and what still goes on is this whole, OBD2 was a great example. You had a initiative which was started by the government. You had an overall picture of where we're trying to go. The government wasn't, about government, they weren't about to sit down and in detail spell out what, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I went to a SAE meeting on the West Coast, and it was interesting because it was most of the regulations ended up being worked out by committees from a few folks from GM, a few folks from Ford, Chrysler, Toyota, all the big players who get together, and they kind of hammer out how things are going to be done. And you go to one of these SAE conferences, and you have presentations by a fellow from Ford and a fellow from GM and a fellow from, and over on the corner of the podium, there'd be two guys from EPA kind of sitting there huddled against the barbarian hordes, and somebody asked them a question, and, well, go ahead and do what you think's right, and we'll tell you if we don't agree with you. It was that type of, that type of help. So that, really industry had to make it up as they went along. And it's a strange, that's the way you read it, Gary?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The sort of the thinkers and the doers, there's several teams. The thinkers thought up this great plan, and then the doers had to do it.
Yeah.
A few years to get it sorted out.
Yeah.
It's
kind of like, if you ever been in the Army and had the classic is always, and I'm dating myself, that, some E6 or E7 came out of the hills of Lord knows where, and, would fall back. The inevitable position was tell you to do something, and you ask how, and don't give me, that's a direct and lawful order, don't give me a lot of lip, just do it. That's one of those deals. They didn't have a clue, but we're hoping somebody to figure it out. So I think the government is kind of that way too.
It was good high level thought. It got nasty down in the.
No, it won't. In the end, to say a kind word wasn't either, probably the best thing that ever happened to our end of the business is the fact that, somebody put these clean air regulations out there because, well, can't argue with cleaner air, but just from a nuts and bolts standpoint, we never had access at our level to how things worked in detail. It was classically, if we had a wiring diagram, some of you were looking at, you guys were converting a traction control car over to a non-traction control car. And for years, if you looked at the wiring diagram, you ended up with an empty box. It was like, the old maps hundreds of years ago, where you get to the end of the earth and it's Dragon's Den here. type of thing. And, empty boxes. And that was stuff that only the shaman, only the medicine man, only, the engineers, knew. Gary's an engineer for GM. He had figured out all the pieces there. But it was sort of thing that folks don't need to know that. And we never found out. And with the Clean Air Act, all of a sudden, you have to tell them. That fault code, that thing that's been turning that light on, we have to tell people why it turns the light on. It's a really bizarre concept. The light came on because of, the voltage of this pin was more than 4.96 volts for more than 5 seconds if the throttle is at a certain angle. It's a neat concept. Wouldn't happen without, without the Dreamers. Again, it got a little silly at one point because they were going to turn on the check engine light if you had a flat tire and a few other things. But, and again, in the end, sanity set in, and all's right with the world.
Well, the other good thing that happened is now you gotta turn the light on whenever the little widget goes bad. All of a sudden, we got rid of a lot of widgets and got smarter about how to do some stuff. And the widgets that go left are a hell of a lot more reliable than they used to be. Sure. It used to be, so what if the valve or some vacuum widget fails? But now you gotta turn the light on. So now, we better make that thing so it doesn't break.
Yeah. It was the Swedes in particular, again, being law-abiding, they were shaking in their shoes because the way that the
regulations were written was that, theoretically, if the government was going to be monitoring all this, and if you had X number of warranty claims, they'd look over your shoulder and say, hey, kind of looks like there's something wrong here. What are you going to do about it? Now. And everybody got fairly responsible. Nothing to do with brakes. That's the industry, and it's an interesting time. Okay, we had these from 75 through 87. Handbrake on the front wheel. Had a whole series of vices. When I go looking for a 900 for myself and one of the kids, I look for an 88 car because it's got it's got real brakes in the front and it's got the handbrake on the rear. But having said that, there's a lot of these out here, and it's not like it's the kiss of death. You just have to stay on top of the development things. Okay. For special tools here, special tools. Okay, if you own one of these cars, you've owned a variation on one of these.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We're getting a little weak though.
You've probably owned several of these. There are a few outfits that make, make high quality versions of these too.
We still get those.
Yeah.
You gotta lay in a couple.
Okay, this is a unique concept. You got to give them something for originality here anyhow. First of all, one of the tools I was looking for first, what holds this whole shoot match together, if you look at this guy that hasn't had a chance to get too grody yet, we've got it's shiny, got a C-pin, tiny little hairpin on the end through a hole holding it in place, and that holds in your inner and outer pads, and a anti-rattle spring, a vibration managing spring. Okay. These can be quite a treat to get out. There is a adapter, and there's one around here somewhere, but there's an adapter to the slide hammer, which in effect is a hooked piece of sheet metal, goes around here, ties on the slide hammer, and with enough tugging and pulling out she comes. Okay, once that's out of the way, for instance, if you're doing a brake job, and again, preaching to the choir here, but what needed to happen was, first of all, you need to be able to slide this back and forth, which wasn't always a given, because we've got to find a yoke here with a spring which acts as a damper, whole shoe match sliding here, which again tended in this part of the country to turn into solid red rust, and you'd have to beat the thing back and forth. I've many of the time gone in here with a cold chisel and ended up scaling out the the groove here with it, at which point, of course, it rattles, but at least it moves. You needed to loop this carefully, certainly as part of any operation, and you needed to crank the piston back. Okay. There's actually, you got playing with these guys. What you're doing is this is a twin piston setup, and you have got a direct and an indirect piston. The direct piston is the one in contact actually with the pad, with the inner pad, and the indirect piston is taking the yoke and sliding the entire, to apply the brakes. Hydraulic pressure between the two pistons moves them apart, and one piston pad directly against the rotor, the other piston yanks the whole caliper over. Okay, what you're doing with the tool is threading back in an adjuster for the handbrake. Handbrake mechanism on these is a hoop. You'll find that what you've got is the cable is attached to an arm with a pin on the end. If you look at the end of the pin, there is a V-shaped notch in it, which in turn, pieces go everywhere. Okay, goes into a plate, and rotary motion here translates on down through into rotary motion here. Now the trick is to get rotary motion on this plate into axial motion that way. And what happens is we have got somewhere 3 ball bearings sitting down in elongated tracks. So what you're causing to happen here is by rotating this slightly, you're causing the plate to climb up on the ball bearings, climb the ramp, and you end up getting a slight amount of movement between the 2 pistons. Now that's not enough to make up for the fact that, your pad wear, basically, you're going to experience this much pad wear in the course of things, and you've only got the ability to take up 40 thou or so movement on the with the handbrake lift, maybe twice that, but certainly no more than 1 millimeter, 2 millimeters. Okay, the adjustment itself, pretty slick, and I realize you can't see a whole lot where you are, but what we have in here is attached to the indirect piston, we have got a threaded rod with that's a fairly coarse thread on it. That threads into a nut arrangement in the center of the direct piston, and that nut has both internal and external threads. The external threads are a very steep pitch. And what happens every time you get a little bit of play, a little bit of wear in the pads, anytime you begin to move the pistons apart more than a certain amount, you are taking and pulling this whole nut out, and you're self-adjusting. If you can visualize threading a nut out on this rod here a little bit at a time, eventually, if I was to sit here and do this long enough, I'd have the 2 pieces come apart because they've been threaded apart, self-apart with my hands. So you end up with these, in an exaggerated sense, of course, but you end up, after your pads are worn out, with these out here, and you can get it back here, you get the room to put the new pads back in again. Okay, it was a matter of using this, cranking it on down, until you could just get the new pads in. And usually the safe thing to do is crank it down till you got pads in and maybe give it a quarter of a turn the other direction. Every now and again, if you run into cars, again, if you have somebody doing work for you there, you'll end up with a car where you've got new pads in place, but no handbrake. And no matter how much you drive it, you have no handbrake. And what has happened at that point is this thing has gone in, so in effect, you've locked the adjusting nuts together, and it's not going to self-adjust. By backing off a quarter of a turn or so, you've broken that lock, and you give them the ability to adjust. Okay, this whole setup, it's ingenious, it's neat to look at, but
John, if you've gone too far and locked them in like that, can you pull them back out again?
again, just gone in, I got stuck in the habit of what happens when you get to the end, it freewheels. You just turn and turn and turn. It's not like you run out of threads and the thing is, or it's not like you can run a bolt in until it's bottomed out and all of a sudden it's hard. You don't know when you've gone too far. So the safe thing is always to go in, and particularly if you could whistle the pads in there, if it was obvious you had lots of clearance, all you had to do was to take and give it a bit of a turn in the opposite direction and break it loose. Yes, sir?
I noticed you're able to do that by hand. The first and only time I tried it, it was very difficult, and then I got to the end where it was freewheeling, and I didn't have enough space to get the new pads in, and they were moving freely along the yokes because already caliper was back against the stump. So I either got the wrong brake pads, or
Never had that experience. I'm not sure what.
how hard should that be to find a
This thing won't allow, it won't slide, you don't actually fry it over.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll get into the other. Glad you mentioned it. That's probably the one useful. You don't need these. A worn out pad is one thing you do on these before you get really to this stage even is to leave a worn out pad on the inboard side, on the direct side. While you quite literally are sitting there on one of these, you end up beating that yoke back and forth, getting it freed up, getting it lubed, so that it can clear all the way. And again, you need this because as you're beating, if if you have a pad out and you're driving the yoke in this direction to get in and try to scrape the rust off of the yoke, you end up pushing the piston screen through and you end up with, oh my God, it's rebuild time at that point. So you leave a worn pad in there initially until you're sure that you got it loose. Along the same line, while you're in there, you find that the bees would hang up, the frames would hang up, and usually part of service on these was to take and to work these out. You find that there's enough travel on the yoke so that you can move the yoke over enough to work these out. Sometimes you actually find that the arm will come with a seal holder with a couple of O-rings glued right to it. It's rusted right on. Rebuild kit, I bought one recently. The rebuild kit was always made available, the holder and the O-rings. And we had I don't know how many different versions of lube we've had of these guys over the years for different applications. We had a heavy gray lube that is recommended. Again, you can look at the parts of this there. Heavy gray lube. I suppose you could use, the red rubber if you didn't have anything else, but that wasn't the recommendation. It was a special Girling Handbrake lever lube there.
Probably get the red grease and the black grease.
No,
That's it.
Okay.
You certainly
So we always sold it in bulk.
clean it.
Pardon?
You certainly want to take that out and clean it, because typically the old grease turns the.
Yeah, turns, it's goes hard as a rock. Anyway, so this needs to be free. Any of you ever come down off a mountainside with the front wheels locked up and smoke coming up out of the wheel arches?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It was red that way.
Big pardon?
I got my livers bright red that way.
Okay. Getting back to the work of the devil routine there, among the many little quirks these had, certainly probably the most prominent thing is just the exposure to rust, the yoke hanging up, this hanging up. But we had first time I ran into it, I think it was around 77 or so on the 99s, but I've certainly seen it on other cars as well. That was a situation where you'd be awful careful, both with pad material, your methodology with how you adjusted the handbrake. You found that, to put in new pads, job wasn't done until you brought the handbrake up, usually about 3 or 4 clicks, and sat there and pumped the pedal until the handbrake would lock, usually around 6 clicks. If your handbrake wasn't set to go, you'd end up with the handbrake, back to the rear seat there. You know quite clearly when it was going. You also had to make sure that both sides were applying evenly, because you could get one of these adjusters that would take up and the other one wouldn't, or at least not at the same rate. You had to go out, lock the handbrake and kick both wheels and make sure that they were both locked. Again, getting back to the basic functionality on these, every time you put your foot down on the brake, these move out, and if there's slack there, they'll adjust. So that it's pumping the brakes while you're, after you've done your brake job there, is to get those out. The purpose of having the handbrake on while you do this is to keep it from over adjusting. But again, where you would get into problems was if somebody went out and just hammered the brakes. Particularly after a brake job, they just hammer them. I guarantee I could take any car of this era with this style brake, and if you just did about 8 panic stops in a row, if you monitored the handbrake, every panic stop, locked them up, smoked them, you'd find that you'd go from having resistance for the handbrake at 6 clicks, and then 5, and then 4, and then 3, and then 1, and then none. You wouldn't be able to lift the handbrake off the floor, because what it would do is it would take and over-adjust the handbrake mechanism. Yeah.
You can achieve the same effect with your turn your whole with branch brake pad while you're pumping up with the handbrake. then it's really been going this one.
Okay, hadn't tried that version, but, they,
Put off the calipers.
it's, they would over adjust it, and particularly, particularly a problem with some very, spongy, I hate to use the word, but, spongy pad materials. Ended up actually going through and having to change the tolerances on the, change the manufacturing process on the calipers here. They ended up having to go in and, classic solution had put a smile on Brit's face, is they had to look for these threaded rods here that had failed their quality check, which is an image that, image to conjure with in the first place, girling there. But anyway, what they needed was something that was so sloppy that it didn't want to adjust very much. Where you had, it would allow an extra travel on the pistons there without adjusting. And so that ended up, that's probably why it's certainly more prevalent on the 99s. By the time you got to the tail end of the 99s, they, I think, come to grips with it. But again, just be aware that if you're to take and really abuse the stuffings out of the brakes, you can lock them off. I've come down off a mountainside in Pennsylvania and just, looked over at the coal truck and wondered why his brakes were smelling so bad, and then realized it was me. And then just sitting there, and believe me, you sit there, you take and you're there, juggling blood nuts, trying to, you can't, everything is red hot and locked up solid, and you're beating the pads out with a, all you got is a lug wrench, and you're trying to chase the pistons around with a screwdriver. It's not a pretty, pretty sight.
You're a little bit aware of your pad, you get on the end of the piston with a big pair of ice grips.
Yeah.
That's the brain. You don't do that. Never takes one part.
Oh, okay. Well, let's certainly hear it. It's a fascinating. Again, you look at it, and it's just one of these that I make fun of it, but you just look at it and say, "Well, I wonder who thought that up."
There's a lot of it. A lot of it.
It's too many cards.
Yeah. Very expensive.
They're not supposed to, but the secondary, both from
Oh no! I mean,
if it does, you've got a.
oh, I've had them come apart in the process of the. Okay. This piece here it's not supposed to come apart, but if it does, I've driven them back together. There's nothing sacred about it. It's just an interference fit over the. You find your spline here. There's an O-ring seal where the screw goes through on the IV, and then there's the two O-rings out here. Neither of them are disturbed, so if it came apart.
I had an old rusted caliper that I was just taking apart because I needed to yoke, and the whole thing just came apart.
Yeah.
The back end.
Hey, take it apart, clean it up, little grease to hold balls in place, put it back together, and you're off on it.
How do you actually, all right, now you got this nasty thing in your hand and you want to rebuild it. How do you get the thing apart? You just unscrew it until it comes out, or nothing out.
Again, the piston, you get.
Okay, so the two pistons.
Okay, you got dust boots here.
How about that plunk and reverse, John?
Did bother you? Just go back.
I was thinking, why is it in post or something?
They all do that.
And they weld those things up when they rebuild them. You don't want to.
There's, I'm not sure what how you mean, the groove here?
Yeah.
Again, this is where, I kind of fess up to being in an artificial atmosphere where there's always one more good set of something laying around. And so I've never actually had to, never had to salvage them. Comes right straight through here. It's the only thing you messed up.
Made a mess yet?
Right.
Okay. I mean, we could go in here and turn this out, or it could just, what's going to happen, where's this pointing you, to that curiosity?
It'll just hit that bar.
No, I'm looking to see where, I got a massive habit of doing these. Usually I'll do you realize they're full of fluid, and I'll start things pointing towards my, okay, worst comes to worst, I mean, neat thing about these from a rebuilding standpoint is, so that's, came right off that's probably the way you're going to see these. The only thing you need to know is that as you go back together, we have got a pin, or rather a metal clip, hanging onto a roll pin. That's what keeps this rod anchored in relation to, so this just has to go back together with the pin sitting over there. Now,
They shut it to think how much weight goes once in one of those. Yeah, but a lot more part, yeah.
okay, now, to say something kind about this, this is, for a disc brake setup here, to be able to take, this is a godsend to have a straight shot. Now, where you get it apart, you do the other option, talk about a little bit. Okay, now this guy has not, he's been on the road, but not by much. You find that there is no real red rust. Hello, all right. You're here in, Mr. Landon. Mr. Church. Yes. Okay, here's another piston. We have no rust, but again, you can see what, in terms of the area that's in danger as far as, where you're most likely to hang is what's outward of the seal. And of course, usually in the process of getting, a lifetime worth of owners putting pads in here, these poor dust boots, get torn certainly. They get abused, and it happens, and you look at it and see who's watching, and you ram the pad in anyhow, because it's going to be turns a quick operation into a major one. At the very least, I usually like to, I don't have a thin blade cutting knife there, but I usually like to hold a piece of sheet metal over the piston while I'm sliding the pad in, and then withdraw the sheet metal. A little less likely to shear the dust boot there. Okay, and then of course you have the seals are just square cut. Neat thing, these have got a bit of a wedge effect to them, but you'll find that if you look in profile, what looks like a square seat these seals are riding in, actually there's a slant at the bottom, so it pitches the seal slightly. And you'll find that one of the common features of any disc brake setup is because your piston is never traveling very far, you're actually distorting the rubber. It's following the piston, and then it's the rubber pulling back in addition to the whatever runout you've got in the rotor that's chasing the piston and pad back away from the caliper. I don't know if that's want that coming around or not, but it's there for the taking. So right, that's what one of those guys looks like inside. And if you are pulling them apart, keep things sorted. You'll find that there are endless variations of these springs, which are designed to take the wobble out. If you get to measuring the thickness of the groove the yoke is riding in versus the thickness of the yoke itself, a lot of extra room there. You have this guy riding in there alongside, And we did the early ones, the old 99s, we had red and green. You had to remember port and starters in your yachting days to remember which guy went where. They went a little more universal later on, but you still had to remember that they, the purpose of these and, like anything else, make a sketch, so you can get back to being ready to go. Okay, pads on these, as far as variety of, that's one of the things I was going to do, was to come and make copies of, although I probably don't have paper in the universe to come up with all of our pad recommendations over the years, and the super sessions and everything else. But we have, you find that depending on application, we went with, again, this is probably ancient history, but just still worth keeping an eye out. For a long time, you find that we had a distinctly different inner and outer pad. And you find the main difference was that the outer pad, if I was to hold up these two as an example, and again, from where you are, you can't see much, but one of these pads, if I kept doing this, I'd add no fingerprints in about a minute and a half. Very, very rough, very high metallic content. You take a magnet and talk about some metallic pads. And these felt like they were made out of old steel wool. Very, very high metallic, very, very coarse. You find that you have to be careful where you place these. So we used to have the inner and outer pad syndrome. We could afford to put the semi-metallic pad on the outside and the more common composition on the inside because of heat transfer. Again, eventually things get sorted out. I'm just doing more trivia in ancient history than anything else. We standardized later on a more conventional pad layout, but there was a period with the early turbos. Your last pad set you did, they're not inner and outer on that?
I don't think so. I haven't seen, I remember reading about all that, but I haven't seen pads that come through that actually identify them as being different in a set.
Yeah, they were distinctly different, and what happened, you put the high metallic content on the inside and boil they actually had to upgrade the seals, and that was along the line, that was the point where our changeover to DOT4 is a universal fill. We got to wait for years of DOT3, and then we had to go to DOT4 because of the transition to the semi-metallic pads.
Just always look at brake job number start.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that back. Yeah,
He's replacing the inner.
yeah, it'll just a good one. Good one, pretty much. Yeah, I'd forgotten that. You're right. Yeah. Don't need all the pads. Okay, that was that style. Now, there we go. Let's see what else we have. Get into caliper types, solution types. Okay, I am looking for, darn if I'm going to find it right at the moment. It'll come up in a moment. Again, we talked about how nice it was to have, this style of housing where you take and push the pistons out. If you got back to the classic 99, your 69, 70, 274, the very nice Ate, twin piston, inner and outer, not sliding caliper, just conventional design there.
Or the rear.
Or the rear, on up through. I've got a tile in somewhere that's not sitting under my nose at the moment. Those are a barrier to rebuild because you find that there's either, of course, the rears. I would love nickel for every saw running around with no rear brakes. That's just those things are just nature of the beast. It's sort of optional, and they just don't get the use. It's one of these round robins there where they don't get much use. You don't get much travel in the pistons. The piston sees, and then they never get any more use at all. So you just, you look through the, look through the alloys of the rear, rear rotors on a lot of cars just to, either not touching at all, or you got, the shiny spot is this wide on it, or, it's, you usually don't have a whole bunch. Those are a bear to rebuild. Again, you can get kits for all of this stuff. It's there. Typically, a nice thing about from a spare parts standpoint is you got a dust boot, a pair of dust boots. You got a square seal, and you're off and running. The trick is getting the dust thing apart in the first place to be able to do it. Usually, you'll find you start off optimistic, and you're just going to pull the caliper back, and then you're going to put a block of wood between the two pads, and you'll have somebody push on the pedal, and of course the pistons will come out. We've had a variety. I won't attest to how well this works. That probably most of you have tried a variation on this at some point. You get one piston out, and then of course you have no way of pressurizing the other guy. So this was an official Saab tool here, a heavy rubber block and a U-channel here, and you drop this thing over the hole where the piston vacated, tighten it on down, and hopefully hold enough pressure there to be able to pop the other piston out. Got one that was really stuck. Quite a struggle pulling it apart. I made up an adapter off the brake line that went to the pump off my porta-power. Because at that point you were doing seals anyhow, and you didn't care what happened to the rubber, and you just end up sitting there with the porta-power pump, popping the pistons out. And then you hoped that there was sometimes to take the last, bit of the, of caliper with it. You can get pistons. Not everything's rebuildable, but
Did you ever try taking the two halves of one of those calipers apart?
yeah. Again, we don't sell the seal. You just have to find the seal. There's no ring seal between the balls.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because then you're into trying to get the lung clean out,
Right.
outside of the room, and that's the trick there.
Yeah.
I've had them apart from home.
Big part?
I've had them apart from home. And they're not too bad. My question is, on the piston, they have a knot. Why do they want that index?
Fantastic. Okay. Again, somewhere here, I've got a kit for these. Shoot, it has that doggone thing. All right. What Ron's describing is a situation, if you take any of those dual piston calipers and look at the piston for them, I think if I can write the piston in this pile of stuff here. If you look at the piston, you expect that, take this guy for an example, the contact area is 360 degrees. You have a nice shoulder, the entire circumference of the piston here that you're going to ride on, and the pad goes up straight against it. Your classic Aute, both front and rear, dual piston fixed caliper, there is a step, so you're only contacting. It's as though they clamped the piston on a milling machine and ran through an angle, so that you're only making contact 2/3, 3/4 of the face of the piston. That's what you're, okay. There is a special tool, which I've got somewhere, which is again, you get into a collection of people's, Saab trivia there. Little bar about yay long, piece of flat stock about yay long, little handle hanging on a nail, and there is a triangular shape to it. It's in fact a template. Okay. What he used that for was to, and you also, the other part of the package you've ever seen is a small pair of expanding pliers where the surface that does the work is a knurled gripping surface that will grab the ID of the piston and allow you to rotate the piston. Okay. What you were doing was positioning the piston and using this template, this gauge, to position it. And if you can visualize what would happen with a disc sander, if you took and put it down to this work square versus, of course, what you usually, what you always do, you lead it in an angle. Okay, the whole purpose of that cut was if you looked at the piston and the rotation of the rotor, you find that the cutaway was always, if you put a chalk mark on the rotor, the cutaway was going to be facing towards that chalk mark as the rotor came around. So that in effect, it gave you a very slight tilt to the pad. It was produced chattering, is what it was. So that was part of the anti-squeal process on those, was to put a step on the face of the piston and carefully position the piston.
I had tried in a different position, never noticed the difference.
They got serious enough about it, and I know I had my hand on a set of those 2 weeks ago. The pads had backing plates originally. You had the tin plates behind them? Okay, if you remember the tin, I'll find a set during the lunch or sometime. The tin backing plate that went between the back of the pad and the piston had 2 little notch fingers in it. And those were designed to keep the piston in orientation there. So if you get into, say, a Aute makes them real nice. Like one I've got is older in time, but they've got a brake manual about this thick. And so you had to pay attention, particularly when you're rebuilding. Is it front? Is it rear? What direction are you rotating there? But you always ended up with the the cutaway leading in on that. I had my hands on the blessed thing just 2 weeks ago, so I'll find it during lunch. But that's what that was all.
So you said the notch went where now, or the? I lost you there.
No, I lost you. That's like waving my hands here, trying to.
Basically, if the rotor comes around, will hit not area. It's easy to, right?
Yeah. Draw a picture on the board and hopefully find a sample.
Well, what would that?
How about like this, the brakes towed in, they're towed in, the pads towed in towards the front of the caliper, right?
If you can visualize, okay, the pads in effect are, very exaggerated sense. They're about like this. If you can visualize the rotor coming in this direction, so it's feeding into almost a funnel effect here. It's feeding into the opening, into the wider part of the opening. That's the way they're positioned. So you just have to sit there and I always have to rotate the wheel and say, okay, what's coming in first? And look at the pads. As long as somebody hasn't gotten in there and monkeyed with it, it's going to be okay. And as Ron said, it's not the end of the world if it's not there. It's the sort of thing that some German probably earned his doctorate working that out. So you might as well put it back together that way.
Okay. Another good thing with those, I don't know if I should recommend this, leave dust comes off the back.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah. When you think about it, they end up holding moisture in. Any moisture gets dried off, and in terms of dust, as the pads get lower, the piston's exposed to the world anyways. It's just an idea. In my experience, they last longer without dust, which the day sees out less off. I won't put that in writing.
Okay. I load them up with the red grease. That's my solution to St. Paul's.
3 years later, I've come.
This is well. So this is what happened. What replaced the old fixed caliper dual piston setup. We've gone to a kind of what's got to be almost more universal arrangement now, the single piston floating caliper. This started, of course, with the 9000s and went back to Handbrake where it needed to be, and then eventually caught up there. You find that the 88 and later 900s, you're getting into permutations of the, essentially it's the early turbo or naturally aspirated 9000 braking setup. So here the handbrake is built into handbrake lever, same concept here. We're going to have a way of taking motion. Again, we're rotating an arm here, and we are moving the piston. There is, anytime you have a handbrake mechanism, you have a need to reset as part of your adjusting process. You find that these are a pleasure to deal with because the reset is really nothing more than a access bolt here and an Allen wrench access. So you're able to, and not a real, if you get tossing around, all I got is a little pinion gear here, the Allen wrench catches the end of it. And you find that I can take, and it's back to no movement here, and brakes are locked. It becomes a matter of
So they keep it grabbing on something.
well, we're rotating. We have got a we've got a mechanism that again, we have to turn this turning motion, which is a little easier if we're on the more of a cam pushing on the end of the piston. Here we have to have an adjustment. Let's do this. Quite honestly, I've not blown one of these parts. I've never had to. So the thing works. Don't I got to know real early what the other ones look like. Yes, sir.
Does the thing ever seize up in our climate, or does the
Yep.
that?
They can. It's not nearly as common, but they can. I've had these lock up. Tell you the truth, and again, I hate to admit it, but it's just, the few of these I've had lock up on me have been high mileage cars, and at that point, leader screw was snapped off, and anything else, I just went and got another unit. So, I'm not even sure that the lower part, if you want to find out, it's here in the hammers here. Let's shop. They will hang on. That's one thing that, and it can be intermittent. You'll get one that just is, doesn't want to move one morning, and and that's it. And again, get back to the old 96 total routine. Pull it off.
One of the things you're going to need Saab bulletin board, the common one, the Saturday afternoon posting, for a guy that won't read the manual is, I've got the C-clamp and I can't push the piston in.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't nut on the rear wheel,
Yeah.
or it's the fact that you have to screw in the front. Yeah. I hate to think how many people get the biggest C-clamp they can.
Oh, yeah.
And they're working on these things.
Oh, I'm sure. But that's, again, it's such a joy, and it's just, the adjustment is, again, typically it'll come up, and depending on what book you read, it's, 4 clicks or 6 clicks or 7 clicks or whatnot, but I'll set the handbrake about where it belongs and go in here and do it until she locks and back off a bit. And, again, as long as, my rule of thumb is you want the handbrake, generally you'll start feeling it at 4 clicks or so, and by 6 it ought to be, good and tight. And you can vary that a little bit to suit your preference, but it's in that area.
And John, do you also have to make sure that they travel both
the same distance on the other side.
Okay.
Okay, when I see that break along.
Yeah, right. You do have, of course, adjustment on the cables. You've got you want them set the same amount as far as this, certainly. You also need to be aware that the cables are adjustable there. You've got they're typically 9,000. You can actually almost you can look down and see the upper end of the nuts there. Okay, as far as kicking the doggone thing around. Okay, here's the, I knew. Mine is a terrible thing to waste. It really is terrible. Okay. We're back to the notches. Okay, the set pistons here is your classic, in this case, rear brake.
Be careful, you know how much they want for those space? 300, I think it was like 300 or so.
Okay, let me do this and we'll be out there.
Yeah.
How much?
I think it was 325. I was gonna buy a new one. Needless to say, I went to rebuild them one more time. Because the front ones, you just rebuilt and they're, somewhat reasonably. I guess they didn't buy a new one of those, they didn't offer you a rebuild.
When these come around, or break for lunch and leave them out, you'll see, again, I can wave my hands and try to paint word pictures, but the pistons are very clearly set there. And okay, anti-rattle spring. There was a time, a golden age, years and years ago, when you bought the pads and this all came with it. Have they reverted, or are you still now? Okay. No, never go back. You do need to buy the hardware kits separately. You reuse them a few times, but eventually they give out, get old and weak and feeble.
You don't even get the connections to the 96 wiper guys.
Boy. Here, at least.
What about buying a hardware kit when the parts guy looks at you like you're nuts and says, "I've never sold one of those before." You kind of wonder what they're doing, and
Anybody own one of these, or? Know what it is, or? Okay.
pull the pads out.
Yeah, this is, boy, you talk about, things that can get set solid. Issue with these, again, get rear pads where, I've had the fronts that way, but then you get the rears that haven't moved in, 4 owners. And, they will rust right solid here. One of the things that, I'll get into, again, all the folklore going back, the stuff is amazing. It kind of drifts in and out here as I go along. If you're dealing with hardware where we bear on the pad here, on the edge of the backing plate for your damping for squeal vibration, you find that typically, of course, you're not sawing these backing plates out of you're not going through the machining or anything, you're just going ka-chunk, ka-chunk, ka-chunk on the 100-ton press or 500-ton or whatever. And depending on how good your tooling is, you get a nice clean edge, or it looks like somebody was ripping a piece of bread there. And it used to be pretty common to, as part of your, what do I do to keep the squeak out, touch the edge of these with a flat file. What brought that to mind is you would frequently touch the edge of these slightly with a flat file, because in order to keep them from corroding in place, you have to be real careful. Use a little bit of Molykote anti-seize compound on the edges here. Anytime you've got a contact surface that is going to rust up. Anyway, back to this tool. These things are setting in there and they don't want to come out, period. This guy went in and grabbed onto the pins, and then you jacked the pad out. Actually worked real good. It sets down over a wide variety of calipers there, and it was a special extractor tool for getting the pads out. There were times, again, if somebody hadn't been in there recently, where this was about the only way they were coming out.
76 and 77, 99 pairs. You didn't say anything.
75 and a little bit. That that there was a real bizarre variant that you may never run across, but there was a miniature version of one of these without the handbrake.
Early 76, late 76.
Well, 75, 76 and up to 76 and a half, I think. It was a year and a half worth of production, if I remember right, that had this miniature girdling front in the rear. And just anything bad, well, of course, it didn't have the handbrake mechanism, but other than that, the sort of thing that if you can get the Swedes to stop using something in a year and a half, you know, it means that they knew a half year before they went in production, they had to know it was bad. And so that was quite good. You had to bring that up, didn't you?
I thought you glossed over it.
Yeah, that wiped out of my memory bank. That was merciful. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Available, but not necessarily from. You say you didn't get it from Sears or did? You can so get the whole set. Okay.
John, is there anything you can do on this parking brake level from a preventative maintenance standpoint to decrease the probability of it freezing up? Like, spray the hell out of it with something?
Have you tried it before? Yeah, I'm not aware of any official place, but again, this was not like the other one that you could pull out and we had a regular recommendation. There's nothing on here I'm familiar with for maintenance. Okay. Now, folks had to leave already, which they were kind enough to say it was on account of prior engagements.
Or a broken 9,000.
Or a broken 9,000, yeah. I have no idea when I start these things how to pace them, because so I apologize if I spent an inordinate amount of time on something that interests you in the morning. So now I'll spend the afternoon on something that may not interest you. But anyway, you're all polite. Let me get into ABS systems. Hey, we have got a variety of those, probably just by sheer count, by sheer number. What a mess.
Just dump it out.
Sheer count, probably. Oh, all right. Forget so we can pass this down. Mark, was it?
Mark.
Yeah, Mark, okay. When we were talking about bleeding this morning, various ways of pressure bleeding, I think he said it's spent about a total of $20 or so on this whole setup here. This was a trip down to obviously the corner hardware store for literally a bug sprayer. And his solution was to took the wand off, coupled in, linked the, again, the standard hardware store plastic hose here, gauge, airline quick coupler, and he's got his, of course, as many master cylinders as you had, he would come up with this. And he says he normally runs around 15 pounds or so. He is working with this style system here, this being that guy over there. So he has modified one of these caps for, again, it says an airline coupler fitting in there. So that's the variation on the Gunnison's Easy Bleed there with the clip it on the front tire. And certainly it's one of the more elegant, homemade versions here. Again, usually they were a valve stem and a bicycle.
You have to be careful about pumping them up too high because you can start blowing seals. If you pressurize my system. Although it's not much of a problem with it. Move road spray.
Okay, the system I'm going to get into is just numerically, it's probably the most common one, certainly for the vehicles most of us are running. And this is the unit that showed up on 9000s and then made its way into the 900s. And one form or the other, the last run, so you're looking at essentially 89 on up through into 95. And say Tevez Mark II system. We had a Mark III variant of this as well. What was unique about this was the fact that we have got, go looking around for a vacuum booster. We have later generations of ABS systems, which you've got all the electronics and so on, but our primary braking is done with a vacuum booster. So that from a functional standpoint, on the later ones, if the pump was to go down for whatever reason, you would still have perfectly normal feeling brakes as far as the non-ABS function was concerned. What made this guy unique was it's a 3-circuit braking system, and it's dependent 100%, well, for all practical purposes, 100%, on a built-in pump here for your boost and your brake application. As a matter of fact, you'll find that in the failure mode, if the pump shut down for whatever reason, what you're left with is master cylinder giving you pressure to the 2 front wheels. But as far as the average owner is concerned, he doesn't have brakes. He has a brick under his pedal, but he does not have brakes. It is a very, very heavy pedal feel at that point. If you grab the wheel and stand on it, you'll have something. But at that point, you're almost better off grabbing the handbrake. Having said that, it's a good system. It's classic German. It's extremely complex, and the later ones just got simpler and simpler, and on the whole, are a lot more trouble-free. Okay, if you look at the basic elements of any of the ABS systems, they're all built around the notion of knowing what the wheel speed is, comparing all 4 wheels. Actually, what happens in the case of this system is we look at well, in this case, I'm starting to drift off into traction control. I can hold that for later. Comparing the speed on all 4 wheels. And if we have a problem, just have to bear in mind, we treat the 2 rears as a whole. This early in the game, the rear wheels we didn't have the ability to control wheel lock on, say, just the left rear or just the right rear. We had to treat them as a pair. But with the input from the wheel speed sensors here, if any one wheel was slowing down appreciably faster than the others, you went in and you inhibited braking. And the way that you inhibited braking on these was, again, if you're looking at some of the hardware, we have got what looks, it's all buried in here, but looks like a conventional master cylinder. Ran it through on the Bridgeport, and as this comes around, you'll find that if I was to just show you this, it would look like a classically German, overgrown, over-engineered master cylinder. And through the slot here, you can see a pair of pistons, springs, all the normal paraphernalia for a master cylinder. You'll find that we are dedicating 1 piston to 1 front wheel, 1 piston to the other. Okay, bolted on the side of this is a valve block, and you'll find if I take the cover off of this guy, that we have 4 wheels, but if you remember I mentioned that we're treating the rears as a pair in this system, you'll find that inside this block here, we have a total of 6 solenoid valves. Each one of these round jobs here is a electromagnet controlling valve. And that ultimately, of course, is being controlled by input from this rascal. In fact, 3 circuits. Each circuit has got an inlet valve and an outlet valve. If you can visualize just on a basic brake system, your master cylinder and a single line running out to a wheel cylinder. Okay, the inlet valve would be analogous to putting a shut-off valve in the line going up to that 1 wheel. So if we've detected that we have a wheel spin problem, wheel spin again off on traction control. The opposite of wheel spin, that other thing, it's locking. Thank you. If it were to lock, slow down significantly faster than the other wheels. One way of inhibiting that wheel from continuing to lock, is to block pressure from going to it. So the inlet valve is a means of shutting off pressure or preventing any further pressure use out of the caliper. Okay, you still have pressure there, but if you can visualize you're in a panic stop situation, your foot's down hard on the pedal, you're increasing pressure to the other three wheels, and with luck, the others will catch up with them. In all likelihood, what's going to happen is you're going to have to, just preventing further increase in pressure isn't going to be enough. You have to release some of the pressure out of the caliper that you already have. And we don't have two lines, one going out the caliper and one to the back, but by having all of the plumbing done right up here alongside master cylinder, you'll find that in effect what we can do is, and again, this is taking much further apart than you're supposed to, but it's just a series of passages with O-rings. Okay, what we're going to be doing here is to open the outlet valve, and the pressure that is already at the wheel is then free to escape back from the caliper into the reservoir. Okay. Now, all this, in the real world, all this goes on 14 times a second, somewhere in that area. What you really end up with is a very rapid, starting to lock, let's block it, let's release the pressure, let's put some more pressure back in there, see if it's still locking. You go through this cycling, which is the chatter you feel on the brake pedal there, until either you get back on firm ground, or all four wheels have the same amount of grip again, or you back off, or the car gets down. You'll find you'll reach a predetermined point. If you're a philosopher and think about, I've got a locking wheel, but wait a minute, it's not going to allow the wheel to lock, you can never totally stop the car. So you have to reach a point where it decides, all right, I'm going 2 miles an hour, and it's okay to let it block up at that point. Okay, now these, as a rule, the hardware in here is generally pretty doggone good. Valve, you have resistance checks and so on, but for the most part, I don't see a whole lot of trouble here. Again, I was able to pull this apart and throw it on the milling machine and open it up, but we don't sell overhaul kits. You'll find that as far as what you can get, you can buy a reservoir, you can buy a pump, all for the cost of a very good used car. And you can do some, but not all. The really neat thing about here, again, if you just if you're in how the heck did they ever think of that mode, is all I've talked about up here are the two front wheels. Okay, the rear wheels, and we're treating the back, single line going back. The rear wheels are a purely hydraulic function where there is a valve, a shuttle valve up in here, which has got the darndest kind of scissors mechanism tied into movement on the input from your foot here. And you'll find that as you push down on the brake, you'll open up a passage which allows more and more and more pressure into this portion of the master cylinder, which is analogous to your vacuum booster on a conventional system. And it's this pressure, this metered pressure that you're allowing in based on input, which is assisting effort from your foot to push against the two primary pistons. And we are also tapping into that pressure, and that's what's going out the rear wheels. So you'll find that although you can generate some pressure off the front with a dead pump, there's nothing in the world that's going to go to the rears. Okay, I think, let me put a nut back on here so it doesn't land on somebody's. This is still loose, but hopefully it won't nail you. All right, if you look, I'll just steal that back for a second here. If you will look at the bottom of the valve block, again, three channels. Okay, the odd duct in the middle is your rear channel. Okay, the two outer ones are the fronts. And presumably, it's awful hard to get this fitting over to here and vice versa, but not impossible. You learn in the game never to say you can't do this, because there's always somebody. And every now and again, the factory used to do it. It was real comical because people go nuts diagnosing the problem where, if you visualize, we have the plumbing for the left front wheel hooked up to all the hydraulics for the right front wheel and vice versa. And we're going down, hit a patch of ice, and we detect that the right front wheel is locking up. So we intervene, on the wrong wheel. And the car starts doing this, and you're looking for bizarre electronic problems, and after a long time, oh, this was at the body shop, wasn't it? And somebody swapped the lines around, yeah. It doesn't happen often, but it can. Have you ever seen one, or, yeah. Okay, so that's that end of things. Now, the pump itself,
Just put white, with that.
they were,
I wish they White Post wants to rebuild one of those.
Oh.
Yeah.
well, they have one price, that single cylinder, dual cylinder is the same, I'm not sure, yeah, yeah, that could be entertaining. Okay, what we have also got, kind of the heart of the system as far as what I begin to worry about when I get a 250,000-mile car coming, into the fleet, is the condition of this fella here. We have a good quality, high pressure, pump. We're looking at, losing track here, but 30 bar, somewhere in that area, 30 times 15, you do the math. Lots and lots and lots of pressure. And you'll find that we need a means of, in a lot of ways, it's similar to well water at home. How many of you are on well and pump? Okay, right. How many are on party line and a full stove? Yeah, all right. Okay. You used to have all these great, and again, give my age here, but when you started teaching, it was just fuel injection. Okay, you know how a carburetor works. And electronic, you know how points work. And now you just get this puzzled look from people. And you can't use any of those analogies. Data buses. How many people grew up on a party line? And they look at you, a party line. At any rate, okay. Well water at home. Those things you got. You got a pump. You've got a switch, and you got a reservoir. And same thing here. Okay. The reservoir is a nitrogen-filled chamber. If you've got, instead of the old steel tank that gets waterlogged, if you've got the more modern guy, the well troll there with the diaphragm and the air, the bladder and the air pressure on top. Yeah, you sprung for the big stuff, did you there?
The previous owner did.
Okay. Anyway, same concept here. Nitrogen filled. We have a heavy diaphragm in here. Under pressure, again, with 1,500, a couple thousand PSI. And essentially, as small as this holds enough fluid under pressure for about 15 applications of the brakes. Okay, which from a safety standpoint, a servicing standpoint, is something you've got to remember. You'll find the bleeding procedure on these is a bit different. Servicing procedure, you don't want to be loosening up this stuff with a couple thousand PSI trapped in here. Tee off, and you pump the pedal until it goes as hard as a rock, and that's the point where you've exhausted the pressure in the accumulator here. Okay, again, getting back to, the last element is our pressure switch is on the end here. We have got a switch which has several functions to it. You'll find this, in the simplest form, this is responsible for turning the pump on and off. Drop down to a certain level, on she comes. Go up to a certain level, off she goes again. Cycles on and off. There's, of course, a pretty healthy differential in there. You don't want the thing cycling on, off, on, off, on, off all the time. Okay, normally what I see as much as anything else, these guys just get tired. And traditionally, first thing in the morning, or if they sat for any length of time, it takes you a good 30 seconds before you turn all the lights out. That's the nature of the beast. Turn the key on, and pump starts to run, and it runs, and it runs, and it runs, until finally, first thing that will go out, we have a pair of lights that are affected on here. We have a ABS light, and we have a fluid level, what looks like fluid level light. Okay. Both of those tie into functions on this switch. Okay, so those are basic functionality here. Again, they'll just get to the point where they'll either take forever and a day to pump up, or they just never quite achieve it all together. They'll just run longer and longer and longer. I'm sure you'll get into the fail outright that, we're actually loss of function is what seems to be the most common.
How long is normal?
Pardon?
How long is normal?
30 seconds. Yeah, it's longer than you think. It's one of these.
Yeah, long enough to scare you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So and that's your still. 30 seconds is a long time. You're staring at it.
Halfway down the street.
Okay. There's some other safety, related functions built in there. There's, from a standpoint of serviceability, and these things have been around long enough, so you kind of know what normally goes with them. Though, having said that, you guys have got a car here, and let's see if we can get the light out or not. Haven't even got to what my suspicions are for that, but you also have, you'll find that if you get looking at this reservoir, it's pretty complex because we have not only the normal gravity feed down to the master cylinder, we have return lines, we have a tap on the side where we splice in the clutch line. So we have coming and going. We have fluid both leaving and returning. Okay, there is a float on the side here, and multi-position, you'll find that what we do here is if you have a slight loss of fluid, and again, checking these, you find that because the accumulator holds a fair bit, if you go and discharge that accumulator, you can expect the pressure or the level to go up quite a bit, just as you'd expect it to change as the pads wear there. All right. If the fluid drops a tad, you turn on the low fluid light. If the pressure drops a bunch, you end up turning on the ADS light. You'll find we have sort of a double whammy here as far as ADS function. Low pressure will turn on the ADS light. Low pressure will turn on the light, this guy as well. If you have significant loss of fluid, you're going to throw it into the non-ADS mode because they're not going to take a chance on trying to pump and circulate fluid if the level is very low. Again, no big deal. This is relatively trouble-free for the most part. There is a filter on the feed end of the pump here, but it's completely molded in. There's not a pleasant thing you can do about it. If you've got 10 years of slime down here in the bottom, you're not sure what you do about it here. So, okay. Yes.
Along with that, doesn't it make it more important to make sure you do the brake fluid change?
Oh, yeah. Now, I'm particularly on this system, because again, you get to the point where, and I've actually been surprised that we get less, you can usually tell, what's the breaking point on cars when the guys show up at class, the technicians show up driving them and someone, oh, they gave me the keys to this yesterday. Some owner will get an estimate and here, how'd you like this? But certainly the ABS is one of the guys that'll, for the price, I don't know, we can punch it in. The motor?
Big bucks.
Big bucks, but I'm not sure. Anybody price one recently? Again, I just steal them. I don't buy anything. 12 or 15?
Well, I don't remember if that's wholesale or retail, but I'm trying to.
Yeah.
It's in one or the other, it's right over there.
Yep.
Is the accumulator available separately, or is
I'm sorry?
the accumulator available separately?
Yes. Accumulator, pump, reservoir, I think are the only items offhand. And we've got there's a pressure switch on the end here.
Oh, you're kidding. No, you can't buy the, no, you can't just buy the reservoir, no. Is that what you're talking about? That's what I meant, you can't just buy the reservoir.
You could, at one point, I could punch it in again, but, okay, you tried it. It was available for a long time.
3 or 4 years.
Okay. Things changed. It was a standard,
Well, they know how to get it.
okay.
John, this one has a solenoid block mounted on the master cylinder. Is it the same in the 900?
Okay.
There's another block of 4.
Get into a 900, old body style 900, and you'll find that we have the very, very similar setup. What's different about it is in order to package it, you just didn't have the space. So you have a little pancake reservoir, which makes the fluid level even more critical as far as warning lights are concerned. It's a little twitchier. And you have what, in effect, is the same valve block on a remote mount. We've got a bunch of lines. These aren't necessarily them, they're about this long. connecting. So yeah, it's forward,
Right, forward on.
above the hump of the inner fender well. But the 900 is essentially, you know, very, very similar. Okay, again, into things that, and I don't remember numbers particularly well unless it's time and specs on two strokes, but there was a recall campaign on these fellows with regard to the boot that went into, I'm sure it's on this switch here. Let me just for a moment here. Okay, on the end of the housing here, there is a solenoid. It's like a switch, pressure switch, but it's actually a solenoid valve. And we're still in the mode where we're using Bosch style connectors, which this guy would be very similar to an injector connector. A little loop you can pop, or if it's a real old one, you have to get in and pick out to unlock it. Anyway, with that style, as a seal, you had a rubber bellows, rubber, you know, gator is the term the book uses there, a little gator here. Any rate, fine in theory, in reality, particularly with things, the way things routed the way they were, is they filled everything up with water and turned the terminals green, and you got into problems. So we had a recall campaign that dealt with, actually, this fellow here, but anyway, we're going in and replacing the boot on here. I can dig, if anybody is interested in this, I can dig a copy of the bulletin out a little bit later. Campaign involved going in and checking, replacing terminals if necessary, going in and actually cutting back the sheathing on the wiring a bit to break the trail for the water to run itself into the house.
Maybe 99,000, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't 90, it wasn't landed at 90.
I haven't looked at the bullet, but it was in that, really early
Couple years, like,
years worth of cars that was necessary. Having mentioned the terminals there, again, once you get in anything vaguely electrical on Saab, what you generally get into is connector problems. And we've made progress over the years. I hate to say it, we've gone more towards GM WeatherPack style connectors, which are a more rational type of better sealing arrangement on them than the old European amp that we had. Not to open up a free-for-all, but I do have some terminal kits here. If anybody knows off the top of their head terminals they're missing on a project like this, see me before you leave, and we might be able to do you a deal. Something else along the same line there is just get out the back of the second state. I'm going to grab something from my back. Okay, we've been selling for a while. Contact with a K here, 61. And if you get looking at it, you'll find this is CRC Chemicals AB in Sweden. So it's a Swedish version of CRC. It's basically like a TV tuner cleaner with mostly alcohol and Lord knows what else here, but it's certainly got a blue dye in there. Stuff is about as good as we've found. You get into Worth and some other folks, most manufacturers or many manufacturers have something along that line as a contact cleaner. And you'll find an awful lot of troubleshooting on stuff like this begins with going in and going to every one of these blessed connections, pulling off, looking to see if it's turned green, cleaning it up, if nothing else, spraying it, putting it on off a couple times, spray it, put it on a couple times, burnish the contacts, bring them back into shape. Also, people get tired of having the basics preached at them, but you can never go wrong, locating your grounds, lifting them, cleaning the sandpaper, shining everything up and bolting back down again. It's almost giving them the trade. The more bizarre the symptoms, the more likely it is to be something as basic as a bad ground. You start finding ground wherever you can, and things can get real weird.
DJ $39.
John?
Pardon?
Question about the pump. I've seen a problem with some of the older 9000s where the pump gets really hot. Hot day, stop and go traffic. You get the ABS brake fluid lights that come on. Then if you let the car cool down after 45 minutes, all the way to the world. You know if there's a thermal switch in the pump to protect it, or if the
No.
switches go bad, or?
I guess just it's overheating from running too long, be my guess. The standard rule, warning on these things was never to run them much more than a minute.
Right.
And they just weren't made to continuous cycling. So if they're sitting there grinding away, it's,
Yeah, I've seen it in the hot summer, you can especially get high into the temperatures.
all right, that's part of the system of law hearts, but the basically, you know, where it all begins. Okay. Okay, here's the wiring out of probably a 88 vintage, you know, 9000, first generation. And okay, we've got, and say, first of all, here's, again, getting back to that recall campaign, the multi-terminal switch on the end of the pump with your pressures. Housing is missing here because got a panic call from a technician who had just broken the housing, and the only way he got the housing was to buy this, and he couldn't go forward to his boss and explain that. So I'm currently missing a connector there. I won't say it's still that way, but it was at one point. What you have for wiring is, okay, grounds, tension grounds. We've got, okay, this is the corner of the, get into terms like the Hooter valve, and where things stay along so long, that around so long they become official, just like, you know, Warthog for the, you know, A10 and or Jeep or anything else. Well, this is on the upper left-hand corner of the aquarium. And if you don't know where the aquarium is on the 9000, that is the, you'd think it was supposed to be the faults firewall area, but it became the aquarium because that's where the heater core sits, and that's where the leaves congregate, and that's where the drains get blocked. And pretty soon it was the aquarium in the shop manual, because all the technicians, all the factory technicians called it the aquarium, and then the engineers started calling it the aquarium. And it became that officially, but then the premier year, the collector's edition shop manual is, and you have to understand the process for manuals being written, is they'll typically get written in Swedish and then translated into English, frequently sublet out to moonlighting college professors and whomever else. And there's, again, I'm not sure the exact differential in the word count between Swedish and English, but we've got lots and lots of words, relatively speaking, and their list is a bit slimmer. Came back one year where if you wanted to find something like this, you had to go look in the torpedo space. And so, wait a minute, and then you just knowing how things work.
That's torpedo wall is English on Fireball. So that's.
Well, this was that, but actually, if you, it's neat because you grab the Swedish English dictionary and you find that if you're to work it back and forth once or twice, it obviously got translated one too many times. And torpedo space, someplace that held water, and that's what you know, that's what the aquarium is. So, anyway, so here on the upper corner of the torpedo space here is your main grounds. We also up there have got one of the inputs for your wheel speed sensor. You find at all four corners you've got these racks. Okay, we have got a connection here for our ABS ECU. Again, hides there in the torpedo space right near the clutch master cylinder and LH box or whatever you got on that generation vehicle. Same general area, either, again, under the cover there or outside, depends on the model year. You've got a relay box, and you'll find that in here we have a pair of relays, one of which is going to be a standard, generally what we refer to as a either or relay. The official term is going to be single pole, double throw, but the short and dirty for the technicians is either or. This is a relay, and if you get dealing with any relays of this configuration, which is classic Bosch, but shows up in a lot of domestics as well, the two outside terminals here are the actuations, the pull-down winding, the solenoid function, and the three down the middle are your actual switching of power. Well, the way this guy is set up, call it an either-or, because in the de-energized position, you have continuity across two of the pins, and in the energized position, you have continuity across the other two. In the de-energized position, one of the functions of this relay is to ground the ABS warning light. We have two ways of grounding the light. One of them is through the de-energized function on this relay. On the other hand, when this relay is energized, what it does is it puts plus 30, use the Saab term there, puts power from the battery into this guy here and on down the valve block.
So the light that continuously goes on, it could be just the relay needs to be replaced.
What they've done is they got it set up so that
Shouldn't have.
if this was unplugged, the light would be on. By default, the light would be on.
Okay.
You'll also find that there are any internal faults. The whole, if you try to think what goes through a computer's mind when you turn the key, you're booting him up at that point. You know, it's like hitting the on button, and he is immediately going out to each of these wheel speed sensors. Okay. Get into testing these in a bit, but he says, left front, how are you? He does a roll call and everything. You know, how are all the wheel speeds? How's the pressure? How's this? How's that? And depending on what comes back, he will allow the main relay to pull down and power up the computer and things to function, or he'll say, no, I don't think so.
Hold on, right?
Yeah, exactly. Goes through the self-check every time. And then an awful lot of the self-check is continuous because, for a safety item, it doesn't matter if the car passed the test 1,000 times in the last hour, he's got to pass it again in order to keep on moving. Okay, so this relay is interchangeable with dozens of others we have, and his function again is to run light and power into here. Okay, the other relay is distinct and unto himself almost.
No, that's a fuel relay.
This is the pump relay. This is the pump, the relay that runs the pump. Unfortunately, some of the younger technicians will find them out there troubleshooting a no-start problem, and they'll be poking around in here because the cover says pump. Doesn't say what pump, it just says pump.
Fuel pump.
Yeah, and we always make a point of hiding in all the later cars. We do a real good job of hiding the pump relay. This is the one they can get to, so they'll be looking at this. Now, something else that kind of needs knowing about here is traditionally, I mentioned before that it was the two outside pins that control the operation of this, that pull it down, that click it to make it work. They broke the pattern when they did this. You'll find that they've got swapping who does what on here. And if you're used to, I can make my CIs, my old 8-valve car start every time by putting a pig clip from 3 o'clock or from 6 o'clock to 12 o'clock, and I'm going to jump it. Well, it doesn't happen here. You get sparks maybe, but not what you want to have happen. Okay, the sockets, the spacing is identical, so you'll find that in order to kind of cut down on the likelihood of somebody making a mistake, they got a little red peg in here to block off middle holes, so I could not physically swap this other relay over. They're at least making it fairly hard to go wrong there. All right, this is a very specialized relay. All it does in the world is control ABS pump functions. Okay, now, again, getting into what's hopefully ancient history, but needs knowing about anyhow. Underneath, if you were to pop this relay holder out, look underneath, you'll find there are normally 2 diodes. One got given away, I guess. Okay, normally a couple of pretty good sized diodes in here. And you'll find that these are for both warning light purposes, one of them. There's another one in here which is a common term on that is a clamping diode. And that's one you have to be aware of. One of the characteristics of, if you have, for instance, inside this motor here, we've got a permanent magnet, and we've got a pretty healthy sized coil of wire in the armature. In order for the pump to run, you've got that armature strong magnetic field. When you shut this rascal off, there's a moment when that very strong magnetic field is collapsing, and each wire in that winding has got a strong magnetic field around it. It's collapsing and cutting across the guy next to him. Now, what makes an alternator work or an ignition coil work is a rapid collapse, rapid movement of a magnetic field across a conductor. And what will happen during those conditions is you get a ferocious voltage spike going up the line opposite polarity. So in a variety of applications, you'll either throw in resistors or clamping diodes. The old body style 900 has something called a clamping diode. Diode being a one-way gate. It's like the foot valve on the bottom of your well pump there. Anyway, that clamping diode would be installed in what would look to be the wrong direction to conduct electricity, but during this instant of shutdown where you're getting a reverse polarity voltage spike, it serves as kind of like that Hooter valve. Let just the air go around and around, while the little electrons run around and around until they wear themselves out, and you avoid putting that voltage spike back up into the system. Those of you that lived through the old, any 1970, 99 owners here? EFI owners? Oh, shit. I was looking for those yellow injectors last night. I was looking last night. They're in a safe, logical place.
Okay, good.
Yeah. There you go, okay. I got new in the box.
Yeah, one of these days.
Yeah, we'll get them to you. Anyway, neat characteristic of those is you would take, you going down the road just smooth as that little 1.7 humming along, and under 60,000 miles. Anyhow, you flip the headlights, and the thing stuck. And then you flip the headlights again. Same phenomenon. What was happening then was the winding in the headlight relay was putting a voltage spike back into the system. And the solution was to wire a resistor across the bottom, across pin 85 and 86, and that would dampen the spike there. So anyway, that explains the presence of these diodes. Okay, diode going bad can do one or two things. It can go open or it can go short. And if it goes short, what it does is it takes the power that normally goes to the pump to run the pump and shuttles it straight to ground, which means the little fuse in here, 30 amp fuse, which is labeled pump, goes to pump, and you're sitting there with no pedal or a hard pedal. Right. So to get the car home, if you know what was going on, you'd snatch the diode out of there and then go down to Radio Shack or order from Saab and get a replacement diode. So if you have a continual pump blowing, pump that's it. You know, you might suspect a pump. The only time it'll usually be the pump is the pump is set up kind of like an air compressor, where you have an unloader on the air compressor to keep it from starting under pressure. Well, the same sort of setup here, where you're not supposed to have pressure inside the pump when it shuts down. Every once in a great while, check valve will not seat. You'll have that blow fuse. Usually, if it doesn't just time after time after time, begin to think the diode is bad. Okay. We have again ground up on the top of the on the firewall by the hood strut. Another ground down on the end of the pump. These are both sort of grounding both places. You can see they're pretty healthy. Healthy grounds, multiple grounds. Both of them have got to be good and clean and tight. Okay, now, the longer part of the system here, okay, we've got the wiring harness. Somebody's going in here, and well, this one's shorter than it used to be. And this was a good harness at one point, but it's a bit lacking now. Okay, you'll find these under the rear seat on the 9000. If you lift up the seat, get under the floor mats, there's about yay big around gray, kind of rubberized foam oval like this. You can pull that out, fish around, and get the connector. And what that brings you to are these folks here. Attached Okay, to the universal joint on the front hull is a toothed wheel. And again, the little things you need to keep track of is 88, 89, you had 96 teeth on here. Okay, you go 90 and later, and they cut the count in half. Okay, now what makes this whole thing work is, okay, if you were to cut one of these cans open, you've got inside here a wire on here. There we go. Okay. Okay, you get a magnet. Magnetic field. Okay, you got coil wire, inductor. Only problem with this ends up being an AC generator. The only problem with it as an AC generator is there's nothing moving. Get the magnetic field. If you ever took a old bar magnet, put a piece of paper across iron filings, tap the paper a couple times, and all of a sudden you get this classic textbook picture of the lines of force going from pole to pole on the magnet there. Well, you have the same thing going here. The magnetic lines are cutting across the winding, but nothing happens because they're not moving. To get them to move, what we do is we grab a hold of them with every time one of the teeth on here goes by, it in effect grabs hold of the magnetic field and pulls it along after it, and in doing so cuts across the winding.
What is that made out of? Teeth.
Unobtainium.
Explain it.
Rusty stuff. Let's see here. Somebody stole my magnet. It's nothing much, nothing special. It's iron. It's a sintered, looks like a sintered metal piece here. Again, be aware that we have got, again, with the difference of tooth count here, you get swapping parts around, and it's possible. Anybody run up with, ended up with, say, a 91 U-joint on an 88 car? Anyway, stop to think about it. The whole input, the road speed, is how many times did this go by? Okay, now if you have one wheel, which has got the later universal joint, later hub, and it only has half as many teeth, the control unit here thinks that wheel is turning half as fast as the other guys all the time. And it's real unhappy as far as ADS is concerned. And you're going to send, at the very least, set codes. So you need the same count. If in a pinch, if you're swapping stuff around and you look down and say, well, wait a minute, these other guys, the one I took off had this many and no one's got that many. A little careful work with a brass strip and a hammer, and you swap them. Swap you up. Pardon? If they're not rusty, they'll come off cold. The heat wouldn't hurt. You can swap them around. Okay, getting into probably the cause of more early problems than anything else was the wheel sensor itself. We find that we had, generally speaking, problems in the harness. Now, as far as testing is concerned, these are cool. Okay, off and running?
Off and running.
Well, thank you for coming. We'll catch you guys. Okay, 2 wires in here. There's actually a sheet or a shield as well, but in the beginning, there's 1100 ohms. And this is where we'll start with your car, is then exact spec may be a tad different, but in the real world, 1100 is about where it ends up. So 1100 ohms, and all of them should be fairly close to that. All the stuff, of course, is dependent. Anytime we use a spec, it's at 20 C, 68 Fahrenheit, it's at room temperature. Now, continuity is probably going to tell you everything you need to know, but if you want to go a step further, get somebody to hold this thing. Okay, and go on to range record here. And then take something like the end of the hammer. Done. Beak is catching a Okay. All right, I had not much, I had 2/10 of a volt. Sometimes if I get carried away and get moving real quick here, we can take up in effect, I'm doing the head to hammer, the same thing that my reluctor wheel would be doing there. I'm moving that head to feel ground. Okay, thanks. And that is short and sweet, where the testing begins. Now, if you got continuity, you're gonna do voltage in all likelihood. From a real world test standpoint, again, with nothing fancier than this, and you don't need to spend the $400 for that. You can get by with a less expensive digital meter. It's real nice if you have frequency and duty cycle, and a capture function in max, that sort of thing. But you can get away with less. Going down the road, you'll find that the voltage output is directly dependent on two things. One of which is how fast this rascal's turning. Same thing as alternator output until you start in regulating. How fast it's turning, and air gap.
The teeth on the magnetic.
I'm sorry?
The teeth, the gear thing on top of that metal thing? It's spinning, yeah.
Yeah, so this is road speed. So, the faster we turn this by here, higher your voltage is going to be. And, okay, so speed is one variant. The other variant is air gap. How much gap do you have between here and here? Closer you can bring it, the higher the voltage is going to be. But then you have condition, considerations like when it's starting to blow. So nominal spec on this was 0.65 millimeters. Lord knows why I still had a brain when I started teaching this, I guess. I fly up. It's different, again, something that had run 20 years ago is a little different than, anyhow. We used to actually have a little piece of paper that's glued on here that was like a killer gauge that gave you your clearance. If you had a real early generation, I'm sure I have one handy here. Okay, this head. The early ones were actually, they're all located in place with a bolt that goes down, holds its position. Bolts it onto the hub here. And we originally had a little pinch screw on the side, and you could loosen that up and like adjusting the gap on your points in your distributor, you adjust the air gap. Later on, they got confident enough with what they were doing, so they just realized they could make them with spec and be close enough. But boy, believe me, if you wanted to bug something for someone, classic thing we used to do for the students is you would take the bolt out, slip in one flat washer onto the mounting stud here, bolt it back down again, and you'd have one wheel with a substantially larger air gap, which would mean that the voltage level on that one wheel would be lower than on the other three. And one of the things that goes on inside the computer as far as, in addition to the are you there function, the continuity check that it always runs, is it's looking for variations. And you're looking for it showed up on our early testers, amplitude, signal strength. How strong was the signal? And that was directly dependent on air gap. So if you never told us what the percentage was, but for all practical purposes, if there's more than 20% variation in voltage output wheel to wheel, you probably triggered a code at that point. You probably turned the light on. Okay. The other thing that's very, very important is just frequency. That's where the information comes. It's not really the voltage level. As long as the voltage level is high enough to get through the circuit inside here, there's measuring changes, high-low functions, you'll work. The real important thing is the frequency. So again, if you were to go down the road one at a time monitoring wheel speed sensors, you want all four of them to be very, very close, probably 10%, no more than 10% variation. And there's no reason why there should be any real variation other than 165, 205, you get the usual, one snow tire and three something else's.
One donut spare.
Yeah, one donut spare. Even that, maybe they're fairly generous, but you get into where we're using the same system and a lot of the same functions for traction control.
Oh, good, we're talking about TCS.
Oh, we can, I can be led astray, we want to get down the road here.
They, it's actually, that can be measured really close, because they actually use that for, tire pressure detection. They use the difference in wheel speed.
Yep, it's used for a lot of, this, again, on the way information is, is shared. The meter tire pressure is the little sensors that get bolted inside the wheel that, I think it's Corvette that has.
Neat, you have to buy one of those sensors.
Yeah, I'll tell you about this. Yeah, well, just, again, the technology, as long as it's somebody else's headache, it's neat. Where you change the wheels around, you visualize this, you change the tires around, what's gonna happen to the individualized little sensor, where you have to go through a learn process on your wheels to get them to, all these neat sounding things that have some wild ramifications. But
They have batteries in it too.
yeah. Probably like the siren there. It's supposed to last for 10
supposed
years.
to last for 10 years.
Or 6 months, whatever comes first, so.
18
Yeah. But yeah, you will pick up a difference in rolling diameter as far as the speed is concerned. Okay, another, hopping back and forth a little bit, something else that, again, on the simple end of things that you need to be aware of is what effect on air gap, speaking of signal strength, bad wheel bearing, what do you think that's going to do to things? Yeah, that's going to be close, and then it's far, and it's close, and then it's far, and it's close, and then it's far. Again, a little bit of that. Usually, the symptoms are such that you're going to pick it up for other reasons, but it will, it will show up. Bad wheel bearing will end up showing up with an ABS fault. So it's, sort of thing you have to keep in mind. Okay, we can get into, get onto your car eventually. Well, I'm not sure. Well, people are slowly fading away here, so do one or two more things, and then we'll figure out where we're going to go next. Bleeding. First of all, how many people have got one of these rascals? Okay, fairly healthy. Now you all okay? Okay, bleeding on these. You'll find it's not as terrible as it sounds, or not as bad as perhaps I make it sound with the the kind of pressure we have here. But you'll find that, and I'll dig out the shop manual there and give you a chapter and verse. But essentially, yes, sir.
Just in private, tell me when I go in, and I think I can fix my car.
Are you heading south then, or don't you know, or what's
I gotta go back to his driveway before it gets dark, so that I can get my car back together again, or ready to get my car back together. So.
Get back to brake bleeding there. The main warning on these is to, again, you can vacuum bleed them, but don't do anything until you turn the key off and pump the thing down to nothing. Okay. Now, if you want to, the way it's spelled out in the shop manual is to bleed the fronts with the traditional pump technique, and which does work, but there's no reason why you can't do it by vacuum. Oh, key off. Yeah. The interesting thing with key, though, is when you get to the rears, you've got pushing the pedal doesn't do anything. Okay, so what you do is you, again, blade the accumulator down to not a thing, and station somebody in the car, and somebody come back there, and you crack the bleeder and turn the key on. And at that point, it's high pressure, but very, very low volume. And all it's going to do is flow out. It doesn't knock you off your feet or anything. It just kind of flows, and then you close it off, and you're done, and then you go and do the other one. So it's not that big a deal. So just main thing there is a bit with key off and leave it on down.
The Saab also recommends a certain volume that you move from each corner.
Yep, half. It was up. Let's see, 1/10 of a liter and a half, fraction.
You wind up with almost a liter of fluid that you've gone through the system.
But that's probably good.
There's raining.
Oh yeah, I mean that's yeah.
Liter and a half.
Holds a bunch. Yeah, holds a bunch.
It actually is pretty
pretty easy. You wish all cars were that easy.
Person,
Oh,
person,
right,
you
you don't-
see, loves it,
the back, that-
President Bell loves the jar. No fault.
Can you just put a little pressure on the reservoir and deplete it that way?
Not for the rears.
No, because the rears are totally dependent on the, the fronts are in effect normal up until the electronics step in. And these valves, where the valve block got to, another thing I didn't mention is the front valves, the inlet valves are what are known as normally open valves. So they will default to the, pass-through position. So, all the electronics go away, you've still got conventional braking left at that point. Okay,
Is this the case where you actually start in front at the short lines and then do long lines at last?
they do them separately, start up front. And there's no, again, they're so independent that it doesn't much matter, but you're doing, again, far wheel, rear wheel, and then where you do the rears first, because there's no commonality in them. Okay, from a diagnostic standpoint,
Excuse me, John, I guess I must have been sleeping during that part about why the rear brakes can't completely dependent upon the pump.
okay, they're completely dependent on the pump because there is no connection. Again, if you get into the master cylinder,
Right, I saw that little pivot thing, and I missed that part.
there's a little valve buried up in there that you couldn't see, which is the only way the fluid is going to get to the rears is through that little valve. And the only pressure there is what comes off the pump. So you'll find that,
I see, so when you push on the pedal, it's not a piston, it's just bleeding pressure off.
it's opening a valve and allowing pressure to flow, or allowing fluid to flow. So you have to,
There's really.
and it's not. Okay, there are, make the offer, and again, go when you need to go, which you're quite clearly doing anyhow, so you don't have to feel guilty about it. But,
You mean we could leave when we had to?
yeah, it's, right, you got your free lunch for other reason. Yeah. All right, it's all in glowing color here. There's books all around. If you don't find what you want, copy machine is, I just simply the books here, but you can make copies of whatever you want. And the procedure is in here if you want to copy it down before you go. But you need the pedal down to open the valve. You need the key on to run the pump.
Gotcha.
Okay, key on, which brings up, again, I could go on all day with, oh, yeah, this, and, oh, wait a minute about that. The particular circuit that fires up all of this, if you're looking at the relays up here, we have got a 10 amp relay, and I'm sorry, 10 amp fuse, a couple 30 amp fuses. One for the pump, one for all the valve block. What boots up the computer is what's known as the plus 54 function on the ignition switch. Your ignition switch has got essentially a heavy main input in power all the time until the battery goes dead, which is in Saab lingo plus 30. Okay, and then your output functions are typically what shows up in the owner's manual as garage position or accessory position, position X on the wiring diagram. A spot where we'll have power all the time except for the key in the off position. Then you have plus 15, which is power for things like the ignition coil and the fuel system, where you have power with the key in the run position and crank position. And then you have all the things like turn signals and horn, wipers. When the kids are in the car and they can't blow the horn, it's because you haven't got the key in the run position. That's plus 54. The characteristic on that is it drops off the face of the earth when you're all the way over at the start position. Start position is plus 50 on our wiring diagrams. So plus 54 is only live when the key is in the run position. Okay, if you get old body style 900 with that crazy gear train we had, with the cookie crumbs and the dog hairs and the Coca-Cola and everything else down there, the automatics were particularly susceptible. You also got it on early 9000s, particularly sometimes with the 5-pound key ring, where you will go to the crank position and rely on the spring in the ignition switch to bring you back to plus 54. And you're back enough so the starter is no longer engaged. You're still in the run position, but you don't have plus 54. So you don't have a pump. Now, I won't make any Massachusetts jokes about turn signals or not, but usually the first way that people notice that you don't have plus 54 is there's no brakes. And it's been, taking quite a few pumps there to the point where there's no brakes there. So that's, again, from a diagnostic standpoint, it happens occasionally. Maybe the ignition switch just isn't returning all. Plus 54 is missing. Okay, diagnostics. Probably most of what you're going to fix, you're going to do with an ohm meter. Again, checking wheel speed sensors. I can give you pin charts, give you some specs on these. We did not have, by and large, much in the way of diagnostics on these ever until we got to later styles in the era of ABS, TCS. We finally got 92 where we went to traction control in the 9000s. Of necessity, we needed to get some data stream type diagnostics where you could go in and you could talk to it with a scan tool with ISAT or now Tech 2. Here on the older systems, guys that look like this, you find that about as elegant as things ever got is we had a ABS tester that there was no built-in diagnostics. You would intercept wheel speed information and make a yay nay decision by looking at that information. The one exception to that is you'll find that we had a 1990 and later, when we went to the less tooth count on the trigger wheels, we went to a ABS controller where you went to flash code diagnostics, where you had the ability to, by grounding a pin, look at the light and count off 1, 2, 3, 1, and then thumb through the pages and find out, oh, that's right, rear wheel speed sensor, or left front inlet valve, or whatever it might be. So you can pull some codes off of the later ones. And we actually, this bulletin out there, the recommended process for the dealers was to, on the older cars, slip one of these temporarily, add a ground wire to the harness, and you can go in and read codes on an older car. Usually I'll try what I can do with an older first. Okay, any further questions on that? Or any questions on it, Beastie?
With the wheel speed sensor, you were saying that you measure resistance, but if you've got a problem in a cable, unless it's a broken, probably.
That's the Biggle test there. That is characteristic of them. If you're lucky, it's just dead. A lot of them would, it could be intermittent, so you had to take it.
Is there ever kind of any problem with the shielding? An AC signals and a shielded wire is.
Okay, now that's normally not an issue. The, again, 2-wire, one of them, if you look at the wire around here, the wire itself is a whole bunch heavier than it needs to be for what it's carrying. And the shield is one of the conductors there.
Okay.
Fairly scuffed up, but again, having said that, that was also a thing that seemed to fail most often for the first year or two. You almost took even money on it being a wheel speed sensor for the first couple of years.
It also sounds like alignment. I mean, I've heard stories of people getting work done on the car and then, new rotor put on or something like that, and then they're having trouble, but it sounds like there really isn't any alignment you can do with this.
No, the main problem at this point you get into is the fact that this thing is almost one with the car up in this part of the world here. These get, they're not in a position where they're going to get disturbed in normal service. You can take and pop the axle in and out, and it's not going to disturb this. They don't even seem to be, you look at some pretty rusty looking reluctor wheels, and it doesn't seem to bother as much as you'd think it would. It's just heaven help you when you get 10, 12-year-old New England car and you're trying to get one of these out of the hub here, it's pretty ornery.
Something like the 9,000 record in my it said if a brake, one of the brake wants to come on, the temperature of the brake line, which is certain.
You're into traction control again.
Doesn't apply to this.
Okay, that is a classic message. It is ABS doing it, but that was only in traction control cars, and that was a mathematical model. We didn't have any temperature sensors in the at the wheels or anything.
So there's no magic in that electrical sensor.
Nope. What feature of the manual transmission traction control was you have intervention. Again, if you look at where things are going now, where stuff is neat enough, where it's going, where it already is even better. There's a basic technology here that's tracking wheel speeds, and then going into traction control, where we have the ability to pulse individual wheels to the idea being to keep the car moving, is now being used for these stability control systems, where you are looking at things like yaw sensors in the steering wheel, and essentially something's tracking the positioning of the car, and then reaching out and saying, okay, well, if I pulse the left front brake for just an instant, your foot's nowhere near the pedal, but by applying the, that particular wheel, bring the car back to line. And anyway, mathematical models, the computer knows that if it's pulsed the brakes X number of times, then chances are it may be getting near the ragged edge as far as temperature, and they would discontinue that intervention.
But if you jam the brake pedal, you can still stop that.
You'd still have braking, you would not have traction control. That was designed for, what's the interest level in traction? I know there's one or two people who got a high level. Does anybody else? Yeah?
Only, how do you defeat it?
Oh, how do you? Okay, are we talking automatic or manual?
Well, neighbor's 9,000 was stuck in his driveway because the driveway had snow in it that had turned to ice.
Isn't this great traction control? And yeah, it controls your traction very, very.
And he said, Robert, can you help me with my Saab? You know all about Saabs. And I said, okay. Well, he had his foot all the way down in the throttle, but the motor wasn't going anywhere.
Again, manual or automatic?
Transmission?
Yes.
It's got to be automatic. I'm the only guy in the 5-car that would stay.
Okay. It depends on how devious you want to be. Okay. How late are people staying? Just out of curiosity. And I will talk till the cows come home and beyond. There's reason why I say, and I'll give you an answer in a moment here. But there's one or two other braking systems I can get into, which are essentially, new body style Type 900. Any new, other than Gary, who knows it? A couple of folks. I'll touch on them briefly then. 3 of them. Three folks. Okay.
5,000.
Okay. I'll talk a bit about newer. Nice thing about the newer systems is they're simple and they don't break for the most part.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, no, I mean.
Well, but here's something.
The fewer parts you have, though.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the neat thing. Right. Okay, traction control. We'll get into those, but they're simple, so just I'll hold up the pieces, and here's what they do. You don't have too much to worry about. There are a number of, what you could have done right then and there would have been to have gone into the, a couple of things, just some involve racing codes and some don't. What you could have done would have been to pull the main relay, which prevents, and this is where you gotta be careful of this kind of stuff, is that prevents ABS from working. And anything that takes ABS down will prevent the system from going in traction mode because we're dependent on ABS for input. Okay. Thing is, you can't, of course, send them on its way that way. Otherwise, and gotta be real careful what I say here, because you end up with one heck of a, well, they told me to do it in Saab school. You know,
It's your lawyer calling.
the other thing, which again, gotta be real careful, you gotta disable, you know, the ABS system some way. Unplugging the wheel speed sensor would turn a light on, would set a code, but it would shut that. If I was out caught in the classic, and unfortunately that system was in an era when we were selling it as, you know, the answer to, you know, all safety and other issues there. It was a overreaction probably to having a little too much horsepower on the front wheels, a front wheel drive car. And so, well, let's keep doing it and somebody might hurt themselves. And if this is what that's for, then it's criminal to allow them to shut it off. And, which is fine unless you actually had to drive on the things. And, you know, then that was another issue. Okay, anything that will shut the ABS down, that's the quick and dirty. Advantage with pulling the relay is it's never officially up, so when you put it back in, you're not facing it, you know, code, so it never woke up, that's what happens.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
what year is that, John, that you could have pulled that relay out? What year are we talking about? What
We're talking about this system.
That system like
Yeah,
this?
this system. There are exceptions to that, but, anything particular,
They'll call it back there with the brief.
okay. All right,
Just leave his name.
okay.
It was a lawyer.
There were different models, there were official ways, I think you're aware, as we eventually ended up with an off switch on the cars, first of all, but two. If you have a manual transmission, which is not the case in that situation, but like the black arrow in the next room has an off switch from the factory. The manual transmission 93 cars were prepared for an off switch, but didn't have it. We had a kit that you added a wire and a switch and put the switch in. It becomes more difficult to have an official, clean, risk-free solution on an automatic. The decision is made not in the box that controls the brakes, but in the box that controls the electronic throttle, which was the ETS box. And we had a limited number of ones that were prepared for an off switch. But again, that involved some expense. Short-term situation, you know, pull the fuse, or pull the relay, make sure it goes back in again, or disconnect a wheel speed sensor. That'll get it off. What I always did with them was to get ABS system has 4 dedicated wires over to ETS, traction control computer, telling you what to do. On a 10-pin connector down back of the battery, take it apart, get a male and female 10-pin, and cross the wires so the front wheel speed signals went to the rear wheels and the rear wheel speed sensors went to the front wheels. The logic in the computer was that it was impossible for the rear wheels to spin faster than the front, so you didn't worry about it. And but that's very unofficial. I couldn't stand it. I'd grown up. If I got in over my head on the ice, I was damn well going to put my foot down on the throttle and try to. And that was just to the point where, you know, I had no interest in doing anything. Or you're pulling out of the side street and you unload one wheel, and you know, it's.
Well, I've been yanking them out with the 96.
Good man.
Maybe you should back it instead of pulling it forward. One of the issues I think with the ECS, I mean, part of it is, you know, it takes a lot of the fun out of burning rubber, but the fact that it'll drop into limp home mode, and just as you're trying to accelerate in front, you know, into traffic.
Right.
So I think part of it is, you know, it'd be nice to have the fun back, but I think probably more important is clear, what can you do so you don't drop into limp home mode or.
Well, you be careful with the term. Limp home is any one of the 101 things that would shut the thing down and turn the warning lights on. That was our definition of limp home. Is that what you meant?
Well, yeah, and especially with that, because it would, depending on the system, it would affect the throttle response greatly, and
Oh.
you'd be stuck with that.
Mhm.
So it'd be nice either, first of all, does the off switch prevent you from going to them?
No.
So,
Okay,
It's the type of thing that makes the, well, the flow over not work.
yeah,
That's-
the one that's a switch.
that's manual. Tell you, let me talk about a little bit about the later style brakes, and we can go look at traction control, just for those who, what are they talking about here? We can look at the car next door. Putting stuff on the table, there's not
You gotta take stuff off the table, on the table.
It is no fun.
Okay, toothed wheels. Again, just getting smarter as you go along, fewer pieces. You find that the newer system is, and that's apples and oranges there. That's a totally different. That one wouldn't interchange, but within the same style, they will. You find that an air gap problem that would absolutely kill a 88, 89, 90 car will be shrugged off by the new body style 900. They'll tolerate one heck of an air gap. Okay, the newer systems, and just very, very quickly, are built around what at first glance looks very much like a conventional power booster and master cylinder. There are no electronics, no valves, nothing associated with this guy. Very straightforward. You'll find that the nice thing about this is that in the worst case scenario, the expensive bits go south. You can keep driving forever with brakes that were no worse and actually a whole lot better than what you would have had, 15 years ago. You just don't have the ABS function. Okay. This has all the elements of the earlier system, and it still has the four-wheel speed sensors. And if you wrote down 1100 ohms, keep that in mind for the newer cars. I'm sorry, the older cars, the original body style 900 and the earlier 9000s. When you get to some of these newer guys, you'll find that some of the values change because on a wheel up here, you'll find that, for instance, when you get into things like where is the ABS wheel speed sensor located on the newer cars, all you have on the back side is the harness, and the actual sensor is under the dust cover. Here, sealed wheel bearing. And if you look at this, what we have is a magnet and 29 little teeth here, which is a regular electric wheel. And, well, magnet coil, the whole 9 yards built into the center here. You can see the 2 pieces of wiring. And it's all built in, and this is wheel bearing at all here. This is the whole 9 yards. And once you get started with these guys, then you get into different resistance specs. And we had on the early standalone fellows that I was playing with. Okay, we have got a pump. Once again, it's a bit different though. Its function is not to supply the fluid being used for all 100% of your applications. The function of this is to come online only when you're in ABS mode. And what it does then is it makes up what's happening as your foot is chattering there, when you're in ABS mode, is you are releasing pressure at the caliper, allowing pressure to go back, fluid to flow back to the reservoir, and you're replacing that. The kick that you feel is the pump putting pressure back into the system. You have to make up what you lose. Otherwise, it's like opening the bleeder and never closing it down the floor, and you're gone. This is actually a 2-circuit system, and kind of neat because we get back our dual diagonal function during normal operation. You'll find that whereas this system was pretty much front and rear, we're back to dual diagonal, and it's a little more has much, much better pedal feel going back to, that was sort of an acquired taste. If that's what you're driving all the time, it's fine. If you're going in and out of, a bunch of different cars, you generally kind of wonder what's wrong with the pedal on those. It's there, but it's got no life to it. It's, feels very, very dead to me. We do have a valve block, again, solenoid valves. This time there's 8 of the rascals because we have the ability to, we still, normally, when we're in the ABS mode, we're treating the rear axle as one entity. We have the ability to separate, which is something we did not do before. Okay, again, very good system. There's a couple of, well, let's see. We've known these type of tools, which means the dealers send back to us because they probably never used them. But the only thing that's, again, if you have one of these, I'm not going to try to describe the bleeding process in any great detail, but as part of the bleeding process, if you've had everything apart and gotten air into the lines, you will find that there was the possibility for air to be trapped between the master cylinder and the valve block. And in normal operation, there's parts of that circuit that are never opened up until you go into ABS mode. We can't very well have you going down the road, hanging under the car, hit some gravel and I'll open the bleeder. That doesn't work. So what we had was a setup here, which in this big lump here, we have a bunch of ceramic resistors, and these little banana pins here went into a breakout box harness that we had. It went into the control unit, and what we did is we would electrically energize the solenoid valves so that while we were bleeding, we could push fluid through the system. We could circulate what was normally trapped into the system. So again, don't remember anything other than the fact that the bleeding procedure on these is a little, can be a little odd by most standards.
It's not possible to do a regular full system flush with a normal bleed.
I'm sorry?
It's not possible to fully flush the system out. The metering block and the solenoids.
Not 100%. Having said that, if you had a perfectly functional car and we're just doing a system flush the conventional way, you would end up with a working system in the end, and you'd probably have, well past the 9% point, of all the old fluid out. Where it gets critical is you've had everything apart, you get air bubbles in there. That's really where where that came in.
Which cars did this?
Okay, we've actually had, not to dodge here, but there's actually 2 variants. Okay, this actually is a little older. This is 94, 95. I'd have to check my notes, but this is the first couple of years on the new body style 900 had this system, which, again, master cylinders here. And here is your valve lock, ECU, control unit, relays, all in one lump here. And this fellow was used, you find this actually shows up on later 9000s as well. We can kind of tour the cars and I'll show you, the different systems. It might be the best thing to do. Quite honestly, it gets to the point where I could scratch my head for a minute or two, come up with the variants, get better off looking at the manual for that particular model here. Say this, if you had a 86 9000, 96 9000, 97 98, you would find this system with this limitation on there. When you would get into this fellow is the first couple of years of the new body style 900. And then there is another generation of this on the later years. So I misspoke, but this is primarily 2000 here, this fellow. Okay. This guy on your, again, early first couple of years of new body style 900. And this is a type we've gone to where pump, valve block, control unit relays are all of an assembly. You can't get one or the other. This is it. You can get
That's the next generation's current cars.
current cars, yeah. All one piece. This particular style, which again, 94, 95, new body style 900, classic complaint on this was people pressure washing the engine bay or people detailing. Yeah, been there, done that. Okay, yeah, people, doing the, trying to do things nice and detailing the engine bay, and then they call up all in a panic because the car now has about 50,000 miles more than it did when they started the process.
I had 150 miles per hour speedo at idle.
At idle, yeah.
And then the car doesn't move. The
Okay,
brakes were on.
okay. What is happening is, and again, we're talking new body style 900, first couple of years. Get a bit of moisture in the connector here, and it would just go hog wild. A couple of drops of moisture in there, and it would take off. And so the speedometer is not run off a cable, it is run off the ABS system. So we just have a wheel speed signal going from here up to the main instrument, and it takes off like that on the belt. And the feature on those is when you're dealing with an electronic odometer, is there is a way to electronically advance it with the scan tool, but there's no way to put it back. You can't even go to 9999999 and start all over again. You just end up at 9999999 forever. And so you want to keep the garden hose away from this fellow under the hood there.
Do you send connectors, just if they got moisture in the connectors? Good seal on there?
There is there is a seal, there is a boot, but it wasn't enough.
Okay.
Yep. What you would,
But that didn't mean that the unit was fresh, no, did it? Or it was?
frequently was, yes.
Yes.
Yep. Again, I keep saying something and then backing off. The ECU on this is, I said the ECU is all one year. The ECU is replaceable. The pump and the valve blocker is not. So on those units, what'd you end up with your car there?
I tried it out.
Tried it out.
Like a day, took all apart.
The car slowed down, you drive it out.
Okay. So you just had to put up with the higher odometer and,
Well, the car wouldn't move. I had to leave it where in the washer
okay.
overnight.
Was it one mile?
No, the mileage didn't move.
Mileage, usually that's what people complain about, is the mileage takes off on the odometer.
300 miles in 2 seconds.
Right. It's, yeah, but it got great gas mileage while it did. And the warranty's over, so we love it. All right, let's just kind of tour car to car. We'll open up I know darn well I confused some folks talking about who's got what, because I confused myself